something about a
Hello, Graham. Tell me if you can hear me, since you're the only person that I know is in here. A toad symbol is good enough. Until I hear otherwise, I will carry on. So, thanks for coming in. Thanks for tuning in again. This is episode 3, part 2 of our rules discussion, how we approach the game. Again, I'm joined by Richard, who hopefully you can hear now.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me. And
no one has said anything good or bad about you, so we'll take that as they can hear you. And also Welshie again.
Hello.
Okay, no one has this. Fingers crossed. That means that everyone can hear. Good. Our toad overlord. So, well, how you doing, guys? So, Richard, what you been up to? How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Do you know what? People are going to get really bored, but I've literally just still been painting militia. I'm nearly done my first 20, I swear. But they're coming on really good, actually. I don't know. I don't know if you're going to see this actually, but let me just try. I need to find the camera on my phone. No, it's not going to work.
A wee bit further back. It'll start to focus when it gets about there. Yeah,
is that right?
That looks not too bad to me.
He's got a really good 6-pack I've painted there. Yeah. I thought.
Looks a bit like Welshie, that one, if you get a red bandana.
Yeah, thanks for putting me in your army, man.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I've been on. Nothing majorly exciting, so apologies for that.
A mad dash down from the far north just to get here on time.
Yeah, yep, that is correct. Called out this morning for my woes.
Down but I got here. Far north? You're in the far north?
Yeah, he's even further north.
I was further north this morning, believe me. Jeez.
Well, it's good to get you along. And Welshie, same. How are you? What have you been up to? You're busy building Titan weapons at the moment?
Yes, that's basically been my life, hobby-wise, for the last few weeks. Just doing this Legio Metallica army. I've gone from 0 to 1,200 points done, which is just over here. Can you see this?
Not yet. Yeah. Oh, that's inviting them all to fall all over the floor. Very brave.
So, got those 4 done, and got a couple of reavers on my workbench just now, because it never just stops at one mana pool, does it? It was wishful thinking at its worst, but yeah. So just doing this, going to get it up to 2k, and then stop. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Got a question from, I think it's Finn. Have you painted any abs on your Titans? I assume he's asking.
Yes, I've painted human-sized abs on them, but at 8mm, it's quite hard to pick them out. So just take my word for it that they exist. They're there.
His princeps is absolutely ripped inside the head.
Oh yeah, man, he's got buff, man. He's packing some meat.
Okay, and well, to complete the sort of boringness, it's still this pile of Space Wolves that's down here. It's not that far off, but yeah, it's I will eventually get this sort of 2.5k done, and then be able to actually do something else with my life and my hobby. So that's good. And yeah, in the comments, let us know what you're up to. I think you can post links on Twitch, so if you want to put Instagram link of something you've been working on, or a Imgur or something like that, then that'd be cool as well. If I was quick enough, I'd be able to put them up, but I doubt I'll be quick enough to do that. But I will at some point get them shared around everyone. So last time we sort of delved into what we were up to in terms of playing the game, what we approached when we list build, and that up to the point where you say turn 1 begin, how we handled the game. So we're going to try and move that forward into the actual phases of the game and some of the elements of the game itself. I don't envy Graham if that is 9 of 30 containers. They're nice models, but I'm not sure I could stomach painting 30. So yeah, it's I think the way we're going to break this down would be sort of some of the rules that will thread through the entirety of this we'll talk about now, because I don't really see sort of the benefit of going into a phase and then tangenting out. So I'll start with one part of it that I've kind of written some notes down for this, and you guys just chuck things at me. This will be potentially controversial, and don't fall out with us. I know there was a wee bit of some people didn't like some of my suggestions last time, and that's fine. A big boy, let's have an argument, and I'm sure that'll be all right. Like Richard's basically 9th edition 30k almost hybrid. We're all able to take the criticism. So one of the big one, I'll just throw right in the start. I'm going to throw a spanner in, and we'll see what you guys think in the chat and see what you two think. I think that 30k, a game like Heresy, would benefit from a wider range of dice. I think the D6 system holds the game back, and I would think certain armies would benefit from a wider scope on dice, especially when you move away from sort of just marine on marine. I don't think there's a huge shock to say that most armies are very similar, because they were at the Heresy, but we're kind of at that cusp where each army is specialised and it's earned its own little core. So I'd quite like to see that element. I'm not quite sure how. I just feel that, I mean, someone has already said a D20 system in the chat there. I'm not saying we would move into almost D&D where you've got like a 7 dice system where you pick different dice out, but I could see a sort of a wider range of options in the game, where the example I came up with would be sort of if you made World Eaters, which are a very assaulty army, weapon skill 5, at the moment that would be game breaking, because then they're just going to basically stomp most armies that they come across. But if you were rolling another dice that wasn't a d6, you could almost bring in, and Richard will be smiling, that chart which is more of a sort of a you hit on a 3+ or you hit on a 4+, and it tells you what you actually hit rather than having a comparison. I think something like that could be quite good for the systems, but I know I immediately opened on a massive, maybe controversial point. So what do you think about that, Richard?
I'll be honest. I've never played any system other than GW systems, so I've always played with a D6. So I probably don't have the best viewpoint on it. Having not experienced any systems other than a D6 system, but I totally understand the point where you can have it more granular, and you can make those stats more incremental. So I definitely think that's a good point and a good system to look at in a way. The only I've sort of started looking at Star Wars Legion recently, and the way that seems to work now. If anyone is watching, I haven't actually played a game yet, but obviously it's my first move from a D6 system. But that seems to work on like coloured dice, and then you have, so like a stormtrooper would throw, I don't know, a couple of white dice, and on those white dice you'd have symbols for hits, or some blanks. But then a trooper that would be better would roll a black or a red dice, which gives more chances of hits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's quite common in the Fantasy Flight games. It gets
Right.
a lot of criticism because people sort of consider it a way of selling special dice, which sets people off a bit because you have to buy the dice to play the game. But I think there is maybe something in that about a sort of a wider ability score, which would be quite good. What about you, Welshie? What do you think?
I think it's either yes with a bit or no with an if, basically. On paper it's a good idea, but you're still going to suffer from the same thing of when it's not a mirror match, the further away from equal the combatants are, the more swingy or the more certain the combat becomes. I think D6s are a terrible system in terms of probability calculators, but if it was a D10 rather than a D6 and you had a similar chart that interacted based on weapon skill, where if you just take the model that we work on already, where if they're equal it's a 50-50 chance, and then it increments like 1 point easier on the dice result required for 1 point higher weapon skill, for example. So if you're a weapon skill 5 hitting a 4, you do it on a 3+ rather than a 4+. So if you can tin that, it never gets easier than a 3+, But if you're working with a D10 and it starts off, you need a 6+, and then if you're one better, you need a 5+, 4+, 3+. Like, there would still have to be a ceiling and a floor on the results you require. So you would just end up with the same problem, but with a different shape of dice, basically. So I feel it would be a band-aid rather than a fix to the problem that is like how swingy combats can be. So yeah, like on paper, I wouldn't be against it, but it wouldn't fix the problems that the game has, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I know that's quite non-committal, but yeah, I don't have any strong feelings on it either way.
Have you
put my data science head on? It wouldn't be a very good solution.
Have you both played a lot of like other D-type dice systems?
I've played a bit of D&D. I've played all the old 40k RPGs like Death Watch. Inquisitor was obviously the first one, but then it got replaced when Fantasy Flight Games took over. So I've played Death Watch and Only War out of them. I think there was also Dark Millennium or Dark Heresy or something like that. There was a third one. There was Death Watch, Only War, and then there was another one. I never played that. I only played the first two that I mentioned.
And I'm pretty much the same. I think there's sort of a you can go too far. Like D&D is something I do quite regularly, and they have random charts that are D100 charts, and like some of them are just ridiculous because it does mean no game ever plays the same again, but it does mean you could spend your entire life looking up charts if you kind of get too complicated.
I want to play a game. I don't want to spend 6 hours doing admin. I want to spend 3 hours rolling dice.
Says the man that works for the tax man. He got a promotion, everyone. So good job.
Thanks.
Well,
I did. Yep. But yeah, like so, even to take D&D or the old 40k RPGs as an example, right? So say you need to do a stat check and it's a D100. You're rolling 2d10. You're rolling one for obviously the tens and one for the single digits. What's the point, right? It's a giant who cares, because the single units is irrelevant if the tens roll is off. So like it's just convolution for convolution's sake, and I don't really think it adds anything, you know. That's my opinion.
No, I think when you look at Blood Bowl, I've not played the new edition, but the last edition and all the editions before, when you roll to injure someone, basically the first number, a D66, is the one that decides. Like if you roll a 6, you're dead on the tens, and it's the same in Necromunda, where like if you roll a 6, you know something horrible is going to happen, so it's irrelevant what the second number is.
Just like
you're kind of the same
death you get, you know.
Okay. We've got a couple of comments there. So Bing Bong Heresy is a fan of the D20 systems because it sort of adds that flexibility across the different unit types. Still Unsure points out that they did do custom dice for specialist games, and they did custom dice for 40k back in the olden days with Sustained Fire, cannons and fantasy, the
that's old
dice.
School, man.
Yeah, I've still got some Sustained Fire dice. And yeah, random dice are indeed random. I thought that was going to be a bit more controversial. I think you're all in a good mood today. Obviously, the weather must be too nice down that way. So, is there anything on dice else that you would like to cover before I throw in another couple of, I'll keep calling them spanners for now?
It's just like, I think you need, somebody just said it in the chat, but like, I think it's unfair to blame dice for game problems, you know. Like, random number generators are going to generate random numbers, aren't they? That's what they're for. People are very guilty of the old Halo and Horns mentality, where, like, you'll play 100 games of 30k and you'll only remember the 10-year-old 5-1s when your Terminators were rolling armor saves, you know, but you probably couldn't pick out any single dice roll from any other game other than the one that absolutely fucked you. So, yeah, it is what it is, isn't it? It's an imperfect system, but it works.
No, I think that's fair enough. Richard, anything more on dice?
Yeah, I've got a positive, actually.
Go on.
That's something that Ninth doesn't have, so there you go. Scatter dice. I love them.
Wait,
I love them.
There's an argument brewing in the chat about them already, so go on, tell us why scatter dice are so good.
It's just the randomness, really. And I just think it adds a bit of flavour to the game. Whereas that, like, I mean, last episode I was going on about Ninth, and that's something I don't like about Ninth, is that you just sort of, your blast weapon just has like 10 shots and you roll them off. It's not really thematic in my head, whereas a blast, adds that sort of level of a little bit of realism to it for me.
Okay.
That's just my personal feeling on it.
Yeah, no,
And obviously the scatter,
adds,
the scatter with the shot as well. So
it adds the tactical element of how closely do you pack your troops in.
yeah,
it's like risk versus reward. In 30k, you can do it to maybe get them in cover, but then if somebody lands a battle cannon shot on you, then game's a bogey. So, I like them as well, mate. I think that's a good point you've made.
Sort of a split there. I think poor Finn is in a losing battle there in the chat. I think it's the... So you got a chance of rolling a hit. I almost feel like Adeptus Titanicus gets it better in that you rolled to hit first, and if you failed to hit, then you scatter. And I think that's it feels a lot better, although that is a smaller skirmish game where if you miss, I mean, the thing can scatter. It's a D10 you roll for scatter, so it could roll absolute miles away. How a Titan misses at point blank range that much, I don't know, but it does add that chance then you've got to hit that before you have to worry about the scatter. And I kind of feel some guns might benefit from that in Heresy compared to all of them just having a blanket scatter. So there could be something in
but
there as
then
well.
you reduce your scatter by your ballistic skill, so you're probably the vast majority of the time not scattering all that much in 30k, whereas in Titanicus it just scatters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you miss, so you've still got in 30k, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of rolling a hit. I believe there's 2 hits on the scat dice, isn't there? And 4 arrows. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I think off the top of my head. It's been a while since I played, obviously.
Mine always rolls a hit anyway. I don't need to look.
Yeah, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of a direct hit anyway, and then even if you miss, if you're a good enough shot, you're going to reduce your scatter and probably still hit the thing you're aiming at. So, blast weapons are pretty reliable overall, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Again, victims of circumstance. Everybody's going to remember a time they rolled a 6 and their shot went into nowhere. But generally, over 1,000 shots, more times than not, you're going to get a hit, right?
Oh, that's fair enough. Okay, anything else on dice? No.
Here's a one to put forward for you, right, about the scatter dice system in 40k, right? What would you rather? Okay, would you rather the 2d6 and the scatter dice, or would you rather the fantasy version of an artillery dice, where it's you have a misfire on it? So we'll ignore that for the minute, okay? But it goes up in 2, 4, 6, 8, and a 10. What would you rather?
Yeah.
See, I think if you're going to have a scatter dice, you have to have a modifier because we're not talking about just purely Space Marines v Space Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen guard tanks roll horrible with their 4+ to hit with their normal guns. So I think having the modifier is kind of good. And again, maybe that's where my initial concept of you can kind of make the system wider, which therefore makes certain, I know, Iron Warriors would be particularly good on their scatter, whereas normal guys just wouldn't. So I don't know. I think I'm still on the normal scatter out of those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too, mate. I think the misfire in particular, it works in fantasy because everything's just a wee bit ramshackle. But I think talking about high tech weapons and
no, that's why I was saying leave it out for a minute, that one. But you'd have to change that. But
so I guess curious. So if you make it 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12, then you've got the same lower and upper limit to how fast things can scatter, but you're only rolling 1 dice instead of 2.
Yeah.
Which I guess is fair enough, right?
Okay. Done with dice for now?
Yeah. Done.
Yeah.
I'm good.
So the next one for me is sort of the unit types in the game. So I'll go one at a time. I can't actually see Welshith. I'm assuming he's working because I can hear him. But
I'm right here.
So I would say that's because I've got to have this thing up that I can read from, so I can't see it. Oh, we're not. Graham is jumping ahead here. Graham, there is a whole rant coming on that. Don't worry. So in unit types, artillery are written in kind of a confusing manner. We've covered this before, where the rules as they're intended to be played are you can almost use your guys as a human shield for your big gun. I just wish they'd kind of clear that up a bit. It doesn't really it makes no sense when you read it in the rulebook until you see a played example of it. So that's where I think they need to put a bit more effort in. And also artillery with tracks like a rapier, not being able to move and shoot, I think that's a bit crap. So I think they need to look at the artillery rules a wee bit and try and whether you can give like a rapier. I don't know about relentless, but maybe when they've got both crew members, they can have some sort of moving and shooting without a penalty. But I don't know how good that would be in the grand scheme of the game. I don't know what you guys think about them.
Yeah.
Your first point about the rules, and I know what you're saying about you have the guy, you can put the guys in front and then they take the wounds first and blah blah blah. It'd be quite good if it was like fantasy where the crew members are just a wound pool. So they essentially don't take any part in the game. You know, so
well, I assumed for years. I assumed that's what they did. That was about 3 years in before I realised there was something else they could do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Does that change what happens at the moment?
Yeah, so
maybe, but it depends if people are playing it that way. Like a militia gun, you can buy 7 crew members for it.
Yeah.
So you put all 7 of those crew in the front. You have to take off 7 wounds. Then your gun has like, let's say 2 wounds, maybe 3, and then you've got the militia guy at the back still running it. Whereas I think it would be better if they were just a wounds pool and they didn't take part in the game in that way. So you shoot the gun and it's got as many wounds as per crew.
Yeah, that makes it easier. What do you think, Welshie?
Yeah, something like that, man. I don't see why they don't just do it like a militia / Imperial Guard heavy weapon base, to be honest. Like, where it's just one model and it's got a wounds characteristic.
Yeah, that's essentially it, isn't it?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, exactly what you just said. That would work to me. It's convoluted as it is, and I've never seen anybody do it. This is one of those purely hypothetical, like, what if scenarios. But what would stop you from like putting somebody like a praetor with a really good invuln and standing him at the front and tanking loads of wounds on him?
I've got a feeling you can't
know
join a non-infantry unit with characters, and I think that's to be. I've got a feeling you can't, but I'd have to look into it. I'm not digging through the rulebook.
Could you not? Is there not a line in there about how they get treated like infantry for all?
There is in the FAQ, I think.
Okay.
Because there was something about Legion of Astartes rules.
Yeah.
And I think it fell under that. Whereas if the model is majority, one thing, so infantry for artillery, something like that.
Okay, there's a good point there of still unsure, saying the only consideration would be if a blast hit them. But I think if you made it tighter as a rule, it wouldn't matter, because like in theory you could instant death them and things like that. I think the toughness 7 is just a generic. They just pulled that out of nowhere. I don't know why they're toughness 7. So you could make it a lot better by condensing it into one stat block, probably.
Sorry, just to go back there, just reading the artillery rules, there's a line there actually that says independent characters who join the unit do not count as crew and cannot operate the guns.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to get a praetor and stick him on a rapier squad.
It's a total waste of your praetor, but but within the rules it's possible, then somebody might do it at some point, you know.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it?
I'm not going to be doing that. Okay, so we're all kind of in agreement there. Mechanicus players, cover your ears. I really hate that Mechanicus are monstrous creatures. I just think that is... the term is stupid. You could maybe get away with calling them Mechanicus creatures because they are giant robots, but I just don't really think it makes sense for how they're treated in the game, and I think they just did that because fighting an army that's purely armor value would be rubbish. So they kind of moved away from that and chucked them in as monstrous creatures. So I don't know how you guys feel about that. Let's go, Richard.
I'm going to give you the exact opposite, mate. I wish dreadnoughts were monstrous creatures.
Now you might get your wish according to the rumours.
Is he gone again?
I'm a broken record here, but I'm against things getting one shot off the table. So I feel like if more things like walkers and stuff like that became monstrous creatures, the example that I would use would be, say, a Domitar and a Contemptor. They're almost exactly the same size. They've got the same size base. They've got the same silhouette. But one of them's a monstrous creature, and one of them can get killed in one shot from a crack missile. Technically, well, probably not, because it can't make it explode from a las cannon, say. So I actually wish more things were monstrous creatures, mate, to be honest with you. I wouldn't go as far as saying make tanks, like have a wound pool and stuff like that. I like armor values, but I definitely think, stuff like dreadnoughts and that should probably get a wound pool. But then that's a bigger problem with armor values and the ability to one-shot things. So maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit. But yeah, short story, you're wrong about monstrous creatures.
When you go, Richard?
Short and sweet, really. I'm sort of on the same side as Welshie with this one. I don't really have... I don't have any issue with them or anything like that. And then a point about the monstrous creatures and the dreadnoughts, though. If dreadnoughts went into that class, could you open up Legion of Astartes rules to dreadnoughts?
Yeah, why not?
And I think that would...
There's a marine in there, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be really logical for the game, you know.
There's a marine in there, and he's fighting with his, like, greatly enhanced, but he's fighting with his own arms and legs, isn't he?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be up for that.
Yeah.
And there's a question then of, so Graham's making a good point there about what about instant death weapons then if you made, like...
Well, that's a risk you take, man. You're a big boy, and if you bring stuff that can get ID'd, then you've got to take your medicine.
And Finn makes a good point about saying, like, the World Eater goes inside and he's now calmed down because he's in a dreadnought suit. Makes perfect sense in terms of, like, I think that it's not... don't get me wrong, like, monstrous creatures as a whole, I just think when you can have an army where your core is something like that is less fun for me. It's sort of similar to the arguments you'll see about Custodes or about all Terminator armies, or basically when your entire core can be one thing, you don't really have, like, most of them come with decent saves, most of them come with decent invulns, that sort of stuff.
When your entire army's toughness 7, you know, and it's got an invuln and one model's got 4 wounds, it takes like a concerted effort to get 1 kill. So yeah, like, I have a problem with Cybernetica armies in general for the same reason I have a problem with Knights or Custodes or whatever. And if you're unprepared for them specifically, you can just get fucked. But if you tailor for them specifically, you'll probably wreck absolutely everything. You know, so they force players into a black and white scenario rather than what we discussed last time, where you produce an all-comers list. They make you make choices that you probably wouldn't want to make and bring stuff that people who aren't fielding one of those armies might not like fighting against. You know, either that or you just take your lumps and deal with it and have a shit game and smile and nod all the way through, you know what I mean?
But that's kind of, I suppose that's the sort of core issue we've probably all got with the game, probably the guys in the chat as well, is that when a matchup is wrong, it is probably one of the worst experiences in any hobby, where, like, you turn up, you put your models down and you look at what the other person's got and you just know you're going to lose because you have to go through the motions. And I think that's one of the most sort of that's probably what inspired this sort of conversation we're having about the sort of, come on, let's try and tinker with it a wee bit and see if we can make it better. I think Stephen's comment's quite interesting about sort of, could you keep hull points but remove additional damage from exploding and stuff. I think vehicles as a whole, I think they're quite... It sounds stupid. I think vehicles are quite complicated because of the number of interactions they have with things like, if I move 3 inches but I'm fast and I'm a skimmer, I can do this. And sometimes I think those wee interactions can be quite tedious to kind of, did my opponent move that 7 inches, 6.1 inch, and then he's not meant to be able to fire more than 2 guns, that sort of combat cruising speed. I almost feel like you need a way of distinguishing what speed you've moved at. Like, I'd loathe to bring in lots and lots of counters in a game, but something that sort of explains just so you can kind of plan a bit better, maybe. But I might just be throwing stupid ideas about there.
I think the limit on weapon firing is fucking ridiculous, man.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like there's someone in that sponson, or usually there's someone in that sponson. The idea that you move a certain speed and that person takes takes their lunch break's a bit odd. I'm sure there's other ways of doing that wouldn't.
I think with vehicles, I would like to see the armor values start higher, and and like the maximum strength of 10 get removed from certain anti-tank weapons. I don't like the idea that a heavy bolter can blow a rhino up. So I would like to see like a bit more of a demarcation between what's a anti-infantry weapon and what's an anti-tank weapon. And to do that, you would need the tank's armor value to go up, so you're not messing with the toughness thresholds. That's my 2 cents on that. I don't think vehicles are complicated enough. I think they're far too simple.
Richard?
Yeah, sort of. I see where she's coming from with regards to the anti-tank weaponry. I can agree with that. And I also agree what you're saying about the moving and shooting. That is one aspect of the game I can't get my head round. About if you move 6, you can only shoot 1 gun. It just doesn't make sense in my head. But apart from that, overall, I don't really have any issues with the vehicle rules per se.
I think there's just a bit of it's obviously a game balance concept that you don't want to move your tank shouldn't be able to move 12 inches and then do everything. I think that would be too good. But we're talking about in the far future where, like I say, there's people usually sitting in the sponsons of these guns, or you've got a driver and a gunner. It's a bit weird that the guy sticking his head out the pintle can't just have a wee shot with his multi as he drives by, sort of thing. I think Graham's point again of the maybe armor value could degrade over a game. Like if you're like the heavy bolter example, shouldn't be able to, one heavy bolter shouldn't just take you out and that's your rhino gun. But maybe if you took enough small arms fire during a game, it should have some sort of benefit, like some sort of boost. But I guess we're making it way more complicated, and the whole point of this is to kind of fix rules.
I do agree with the concept of that, but then it's the admin, isn't it? Yeah, like you're going to have to remember like what stage of degradation you're at. There's another table you'd have to look up. Like it adds more to the game where you're spending less time playing the game and more time looking up tables. So like on that basis, I'm probably against it, but the actual idea has got merit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this we're not here. I mean, hopefully the people in the chat aren't expecting us to be writing this down and coming up with a rule book by the end of the night. It's not about that. It's just about some of the things that kind of the interactions that maybe we're hoping that people are looking at in this rumoured new rulebook, which may or may not be coming. I doubt it's going to be next Saturday, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. So what about though? Because Richard, you've said you don't mind vehicle rules. What about flyers though? They don't really deliver for me. If you take something like the Custodes, big Lord of War one, I like it. I know Welshie absolutely hates the look of it. But when you've got the transport one, or take a Thunderhawk, we can use that as well if you don't want to use the Custodes one. It comes in and it drops troops off, and it has it has a decent gun on it, but it just never really, they just don't deliver. And I know Anuj, I was in a thread on Crusade and Heresy with him where he was kind of slagging the flyer rules off and saying they just don't work. But it just kind of feels bad. Like if I've put 750 points into a Thunderhawk and it doesn't turn up till turn 4, that just feels bad. It's just crap. And one of the things that sort of we touched on last time was stratagems and things like that, and whether they would be beneficial. Almost feel like a stratagem that allowed you to bring one reserve in no matter what. It doesn't matter if you can roll for it first, even if you want to make it that extremely good, as long as the points were appropriate, and then you can just go, no, you know what, bam, my Thunderhawk's coming in, and there's nothing you can do about it. I don't know. On you go.
No, I thought you were finished, but just continue.
No, that was pretty much it. Just I think the idea of flyers, obviously we're on a 6x4, you can't make the game any bigger because you're not going to be able to play on like a 100-foot table where a flyer would make sense. So if you're playing with the limits we've got, either remove flyers entirely from the game and just say they're not an element, in which case lots of people, me included, have lots of expensive paperweights, or you try and just make them a bit more, I don't know if reliable is the word, but usable. I think that's the problem for me.
Right. First point, this is going back to the last episode. And the point I was saying last week about your reserves, I'd like to see you just be able to choose when they're coming in. Because I think an army is tactically superior as the Space Marines would be able to pretty much guarantee when they're having their reserves and flyers coming into the board, you know. And I think by doing that, you're having a bit more of a positive interaction using that model, because you're not worrying about it not coming in, and you're not worrying about it not doing the job you took it for.
Yeah.
A lot of time flyers I find they're sort of like pigeonholed into roles. And like if you're like my Xiphon, I use it to take out vehicles and tanks or whatever, because that's what it's best at in my opinion. But if you don't have it come in until turn 4 and there's not much left on the table, you're not getting a positive interaction with that model. So first of all, letting that come in when you want removes that issue. I think, I'm not sure how to get around this one, but I almost feel like they're moving too much out of your own control a bit. You know, they've always got a pivot, they've always got to move at least 18. And I'm not sure how you would. I don't know what you would change in that. And because sometimes I feel like if you place it badly when it comes in, you're shooting off the board the next turn sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's another negative to them. But I'm not sure what the solution to that is.
Okay. What about you, Welshie? What do you think?
So, Richard's basically nailed it for me. You should be able to pick what turn things come in on. And that's it. And I know certain legions have got rules that interact with reserves in different ways. They could keep that, but just have it as like a one-turn veto maybe, or something like that. Second point I would make is about the movement rules that you just talked about. I feel like, as they are, they're utterly ridiculous, right? Like, a supersonic jet moving 18 inches ground scale on a 6x4 table means that in a couple of minutes it's flown 50 yards, 100 yards. It's ridiculous, right? So for me, my suggestion would be you can just put it wherever you want, facing whatever direction it wants, to represent the fact it's done its attack run, dacked, pulled up, done a circle, and came back down. You know, because within the time frame on a turn-by-turn basis, that would be perfectly feasible for a jet moving at that speed, right? So that means like you've got total control over where it goes, what it faces at, what it shoots at, and you don't have that situation where like you're like, yeah, okay, I really want to shoot that tank, but then next turn, because I have to move 18 inches, which is a weird random number, I'm off the table, and then I've missed a turn, and I'm back on the following turn. They're wasteful, you know. But to counter that absolute carte blanche maneuverability, I would probably also have a rule that the other guy's weapons, if they've got Skyfire, probably count as unlimited range against actual jets. Something like that. Something to start. You know what I mean? If you're going to give with one hand, you need to take away with another hand. You need to balance it out. Otherwise, you would just make flyers totally OP. So yeah, I would let them do whatever they wanted movement wise, because at the end of the day, they're moving faster than the speed of sound, so they could get around a 6x4 table really easily. But yeah, I would give the enemy more options for shooting them down as well, just to make it fairer. Otherwise, you'd end up with proper flyer meta, and people would be mad. Understandably so.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, though. I think that sort of that idea. So the only one that Games Workshop tried to fix it themselves. I think it was at the end of 6th edition, maybe the end of 7th edition. 7th edition, they brought out the book that was like about flyers, and it had. They were almost treating it as if they were their own entity. So like during a game, flyers would just be dealing with themselves, and it looked interesting. Like if you had a full day to play a game, it sounds brilliant. Like that your flyers will be shooting other flyers, and you almost like fantasy used to do, where you could fly high and only interact with other flying high creatures. I think that's quite interesting, but I don't have 6 hours to play a game, and I don't want to have to. We put our flyers on the side of the board and forget about them, and then 3 turns later go, oh yeah, I was meant to be shooting you, and you're meant to be shooting me. We've not done it. I think
Why
that's
not just play Aeronautica, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it's like just there's already a game for that, and it doesn't require you to have like giant flyer models. You can have little tiny plastic ones.
Yeah. So I think there's something not quite. I'm sure we won't be able to. So I think she's kind of on the right track. I think a bit of a muck about with the points, more ability to put the flyer where you want, but also like something like being able to intercept, like Skyfire and Interceptor together would be more beneficial then, because then it's sort of actually. When I bring my flyer in and I put my instead of deep strike in a flyer as well, like if I deep strike a Thunderhawk, it doesn't really make sense that it can like die. I don't think a Thunderhawk can deep strike, but you know what I mean, like a Storm Eagle can deep strike, I think, but just doesn't really make sense that it kind of comes in, oh no, I've gone a bit too low, and just crashes into the ground. Like it's a really weird system there. But there's Lee is saying, I'd be very sad if they drop flyers because his Raven Guard don't have any tanks. Not saying that at all. I do like flyer models. It's too late. The cat is out of the bag with flyers. You have to make them work in the game. You can't take them away. And then I think it's Struan, I'm not sure if it is, go by the username, saying that thinks she's onto something, and some sort of delineation between sort of drop pods and actual things that can fly about, which I think makes sense as well.
Is anybody old enough to remember the first rule for drop pods from Imperial Armour 1?
No.
So you used to have to choose a point on a table edge, right? And that was the point which they originated from. Then you had to choose a point where they were going to land, and the enemy would get an entire turn as it transitioned from the table edge point to the destination point, where anything that was within 12 inches of that line could try and shoot it down before it landed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty out there, man.
But that must also be in the game system where if you had someone in front of you and behind you and you failed a morale check, you just died, which was a bit brutal for me. Didn't matter if it was one guy, like you got caught in crossfire and died. That was 5th edition, I think. That was a bit brutal. Okay, so anything on flyers before I go for my last thing, where we're not really on time, but that doesn't matter. So the last major rule that I'd be amazed if anyone disagrees with this is I'm moving into the sort of super heavy territory. I just don't think stomp should be a thing. I think it's bollocks. I think it is the worst rule in not even just Heresy. I think it's probably the worst rule in any game that Games Workshop have ever done, because the idea that you're playing with these creatures of legend, a Primarch, and if I roll a 6 on a chart, your Primarch's just dead. I just think that is so. And from a knight's foot is probably smaller than a Primarch's like frame. Like in the lore, you've got Angron tips a Warhound onto its arse because he gets mad. Like it doesn't, and Sanguinius flying about smashing Titans left, right, and centre in the current Solar War books just doesn't work for me.
Spoiler alert there, man. Jeez.
It just doesn't work, and I think it's so obviously broken that they could just make super heavy walkers never be able to be locked in combat. Doesn't matter if it's a knight or a warlord. And then just give them stuff that makes them actually good. Like they can, if you need to do an area thing, just don't make it ignore invulns or don't make it ignore armor because they're just sort of throwing their bulk about. Give them lots more attacks if you want. I just really, Stomp is such a crap rule. Really, like, I hate it. And I'd be amazed if anyone thinks that it's fair or good. But
Can I answer first?
Yeah, go on.
So, right.
I'm going to kick you out if you say that you think it's good.
For starters, I don't think knights should be super heavy walkers, right? There's already a vehicle type that's lighter than that. They could just be heavy, and they could still fire all their guns and shit and move about, blah, blah, blah. And you remember when you tried to make me and Dick argue about Typhons 2 months ago, and I talked about how I hate things that move agency from the game, and the Stomp table is a prime example. And it's like, nothing makes me feel worse about winning a game than when I've won it because I rolled a 6 and the enemy warlord got removed from play without even getting to do anything. Like, that's shit. It makes me go home in a bad mood. So yeah, fully agree, man. Stomp shouldn't be a thing, or it shouldn't be a thing in its current guise. And pardon me while I've just dropped a couple of gun barrels.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like, it's too much, man. Just let them, like, let them put their stupid little blast markers down and let them roll to wound. You know, maybe have a different for, like, maybe sometimes it's strength 10, sometimes it's strength 6, blah, 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 whatever, man. But just the random, like, remove from play is fucking bullshit.
What's your
Yeah.
input to that?
No, I agree with both of you. The only thing I was going to say is what Welshie's just touched on about having the table slightly redone and like doing it at different strengths depending on the model he's doing the stomp. So I was thinking in my head whilst you were talking there, are most Primarchs very bulky?
No.
Or do we have some that are bulky?
I've got a feeling there's probably a split pretty even between bulky and very bulky, because I think
Mm.
it's only like Perturabo and Mortarion, I think, are considered units.
The ones that are in Terminator, I know they're not actually in Terminator armor, it's supposed unique armors, but the ones that look like they're in Terminator armor, I think, are very bulky. And the ones that look like they're in power armor are just bulky.
Or
Right?
just bulky?
I don't know off the top of my head, but from the ones that I've looked at, because I own them, I think that's legit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was just thinking if that's sort of a parameter they could use to make up a table to allow them to still do the stomp or the kicks or whatever.
But I even think
Because I see the point of it. I see the point of it, but it's like you say, it's the fact that they just get removed. That's the issue.
Yeah,
but if
another problem is that a knight has the same stomp table as a warlord titan.
Yeah.
Right. So the footprint they use is a small blast marker, 2.5 inch, which is much bigger than a knight's footprint, and much smaller than a warlord titan's footprint.
Yeah.
So, I feel like rather than have a stomp table, they should, to use one of your party lines, Dick, take a leaf out of 9th edition 40k's book and have their stomp as a weapon profile in their armament.
Yeah.
And just be like, so if you stomp, you get, like, I don't know, D3 attacks per 5 people you're fighting or something like that. Link it to the size of the enemy force that you're up against. But there's a profile for it, which, you know, I can imagine most Marines would actually survive getting kicked by a knight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? See, if you look at them on a ground scale, I've got one here. I mean, that Marine's up to the knight's knee. I don't think a knight can kick him to death. Not unless it rolled a 6.
Graham is asking, as a warlord, not use a large blast, and I'm pretty sure it's all the same. I think stomp is just one universal rule, which is why there's a big issue with it. I also hate the concept that your super heavy walker jumps about and then ends up back where it started. Like, just the whole mechanic behind it is just it's just bad. It just leaves I don't think it's a fun mechanic. You can also stomp onto units that aren't locked in the combat with you if you roll well enough on your things. Graham's maybe saying it has its. Graham thinks it might have its own rule under it. It might do, Graham. I don't know, but it still doesn't feel like a fun rule. Like, I don't. The idea that popped into my head would be something to do with its remaining hull points, or the hull points it started with would be the number of extra, like. Just treat it as Hammer of Wrath or something. Like, it comes in and boots you initiative 10. If you've got a warlord with 15 hull points, it does 15 attacks, and you get your save. And that way, it's not. It means your warlord, which is clumsy and crap and probably only has a few attacks, isn't terrible. But it also means that it comes in and actually does the sort of kicks the dirt in the face of the enemy before it swings its arm down and hits a few guys or whatever. I just feel that would be a better rule for me.
I'd probably say like a 1-to-1 ratio of hull points to attacks would probably be a bit extreme, man.
Maybe
hull points divided by 3.
So Hammer of Wrath would be strength 10, AP nothing. Like, you still get all your saves and everything.
Aye, but it hits automatically.
But you still got wind.
Yeah, come on, man. Like, 15 automatic hits would be extreme. That would be almost as extreme as the thing we're trying to make less extreme.
Maybe, but I don't know. That's just a better suggestion than a random table and a random number of, because you could roll really well and biplate something that you've not even locked into combat.
It's like, I'm not arguing for the current system. I'm just saying maybe like a 1-to-1 ratio of hull points to attacks would be a bit much.
Although if you've got a warlord on the table, then it's probably the least of your worries than getting a unit getting kicked 15 times.
Well,
Anyway, so anything in the actual core rules you would like to discuss more along those lines before we kind of move on to the actual turns of the game?
Well, we'll get to the phases, won't we?
Don't think so.
So
No.
Okay, you've had your chance. So last time we talked up to the point where someone chose to seize or not. So if we kick off at sort of turn 1, we're just about to start playing, and how you treat that part of the game. So I would probably say turn 1 for me is the reaction turn, where I fix the mistakes in my deployment, where my opponent has done something that I didn't expect, or where I really need to think about sort of the longer term strategy of the game, of whether do I push forward now in the hope that I can do something that turn, or do I hold back a little bit, especially when I've got like an assault army like World Eaters on the table. I would say 9 times out of 10 I'm moving forward, whereas maybe my Space Wolves I play a little bit more cautious, because if I can get you to move forward, then I can get you on the next turn, sort of thing. Is there anything in there that you kind of treat turn 1 that we're say sort of movement I'm kind of talking about here? So is there anything in movement that you do specially that you think is a worthwhile note? And go Richard first.
No, the movement phase all sort of depends on the army you're playing and the way you want to play it. I wouldn't say there's anything majorly special I do, but I would agree with you on the it's more like the reactionary phase for the first turn, or you're trying to, if you are going first, you are trying to make most of those advantages you've got. So that's the things I usually think about. Fix any mistakes and take advantages where I can whilst I've got that first movement.
Okay.
But apart from that, there's nothing really special. That's it for me, really.
Okay, and Welshie?
Yeah, I don't have anything of great value to add to what you two have already said. Yeah, just like, depending, obviously, if I've deployed first and I'm going first, then I've got a plan. And I tend to stick to my plan rather than try and react. But if the enemy's done something that forces a reaction out of me, then full marks to them for making me change my plan before the game's even started. I'll probably try and react to it. But no, generally, I've got an idea when I deploy my units of where I want them to go, and I move towards that plan. I quite like to bait people into doing stuff. So turn 1 normally for me involves a throwaway unit going somewhere that they probably shouldn't go. Spoiler alert for anybody that plays me at the next event.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. You got me worried now. And there's not really anyone saying anything in the chat, so I don't think that's a massive surprise that you kind of use that as your... Even later in the game, in the movement phase, there's not really anything tactically I would say I do that is like, I'm not like, what can you do? You can move 6 inches with most stuff, so it's not like you can be like, oh, if I do this, then I can gain extra inches. It just doesn't work like that. The movement phase as it is, I think, is actually alright. It's not something that excites me or upsets me. It was interesting when we moved away from having different movements on units.
I wish we could move back, mate. I wish we could move back.
Yeah, maybe, but I guess that's going into that sort of different stat lines for... So say, I don't know, because Space Wolves can run an extra inch, do you make their movement 7? Or do you make the, like,
well, I mean,
Death Guard
I would
movement
probably
5?
I would probably go back to the old way where, like, your average kind of humanoid creature moves 4, like back in 2nd edition. You know what I mean? And can I maybe take a wee step back in that sense? But yeah, like, for example, right now, and sorry to go off on slightly a tangent, but everything humanoid or everything that walks or trundles or crawls or slimes or whatever walks the same speed. Everything that tracks moves the same speed, and then everything that counts as being super heavy moves the same speed, which is faster than the smaller, lighter reconnaissance tanks for some reason. Anyway, so yeah, I would quite like to see some demarcation. And to use an example we talked about earlier on, like a Contemptor, why is a Contemptor the exact same speed as a Marine? You know, it's probably almost as agile as a Marine, but it's got a much bigger stride. So yeah, I would just like to see a bit more granularity and movement values. It would only be adding one stat to a stat line, so we've already got like a stat line and for every unit, and all you need to do is reinstate the M at the start and have how many inches it can move. It'd be a very simple change to make, and it would add a lot of different tactical flexibility to the game, I think, you know.
Yeah, they'd just have to go to the 9th edition books and just copy that stat line.
Damn, you're a spy, Games Workshop spy. Richard's trying to soften everyone up for what's happening next Saturday when we get the 9th edition rules.
Yeah.
There's a good point actually, just seen in the comments there. Forge Hawk, sort of trying to make the game be Yugo Aigo. I do really like Yugo Aigo. I'm completely biased on that. I'm not convinced it would use the Heresy rule set as it is very well, but in every game I've ever played with Yugo Aigo, I've had probably a closer game until late on. I think late on, but then you say that about Heresy as well, I do everything, you do everything. Late on, it can just completely swing out of balance. But there is something in that in terms of the game. I almost want to play a few games where you keep the rules as they are, but you make it be Yugo Aigo and see what difference it would make, just to see if it would be better. I think there is something in that actually.
Yeah, I think so, mate. Yeah. I agree. It'd be a change that I would welcome wholeheartedly. I think that the rule system would work, right? Because you're not changing how things perform. You're just changing what they perform, I guess. Like, so I feel like it'd be pretty alright.
Yeah. It's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, my mind's gone totally blank.
Probably fair, which is a word that you don't know very well.
Fired, officer down.
No, I was just like that opens up the possibility for you to react to what your opponent's doing.
Yeah,
and I think that's just a bit more. I can't even think of the word I need. Oh, jeez, it's bad.
It's just fitting. I just think it's better. Like if you're a Primarch and you're seeing, the World Eaters are coming up our left flank, let's deploy this Breacher squad to the right, to that side of the battlefield to hold them up, sort of thing. I think that is a better system overall. I don't see it happening, but I wish it would. I think it would just be better because of exactly as Forge Hawks followed up there. You can win in turn one in the rules as is, because you can just do enough firepower damage that it's just right. I know I've lost, and now I've got another 4 turns to play with you before we say goodbye, sort of thing.
That's the word I was wanting. Interactive. That's it. Thank you, Forge Hawk. That's it. More interactive. Okay. Thank you.
So the only anytime, mate. I think that the only thing I would, again, I'll be absolutely amazed if anyone says anything different, is just make it official that you run in the movement phase. I just don't.
Man.
I don't see the point. Yeah. It's so so when you go to an event and someone picks you up on it, it is really frustrating when you're in like. I've not had it in 30k, but in 40k I've had it where someone's like, "Oh, you've just skipped your the rest of your movement phase," and it's like, "Oh, just get a grip." Like, it's just who wants to win like that? Anyway, that's an aside for poor 40k players. I think just having that in there would make a big difference for me because everyone does it anyway. So what's the point? Okay. Anything else on movement from you guys?
Nah, mate. The running thing is definite, man. Like that should just be the rule. Like, okay. Right.
Let us have a very quick break, because I know Welshie, you're on a bit of a tight time scale, and then we can get back and it'll be me ranting for maybe the whole rest of the time that you're on about the next phase, but we'll see how we get on. So go and recharge your glasses and we'll be back in a couple of minutes' time.
Fuck.
What a great way to come back in as the man who's realised these polarities are back to front. Hopefully you can hear us now and we're all back and at it, and I won't edit out that fuck because it was too good. So before I start this rant, I'm going to show some of the community stuff that we've been keeping an eye on. And I will start with... no drum roll needed. So the guys at Warzone Heresy Scotland are sort of pushing their Instagram, and I thought it'd be nice to give them a wee nod. They're another group that are looking to do events in Scotland, and you can see some very talented work on their Instagram there. So take a look at them, and you can get to see some of their battle reports and stuff that they've they've started to show some of the photos from the past. So take a wee look at them. And then another one. So this is someone who, it's a shame Gary's not here because he was there when we met OA Gamer. He's a guy from Malaysia, and he's an American originally, but he was over at Warhammer World. We bumped into him, had a few drinks and a bit of a laugh and a carry on. He's a brilliant hobbyist as well, although I think he buys quite a lot of his stuff painted, so maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but he's much like us. He's trying to set up some sort of community and gaming stuff over in Malaysia, so hopefully he will appreciate a wee nod as well. And then we've got our very own, who again, he's not bloody here because he told us he was getting drunk this weekend, our very own Willie McGilvery, Night Lord player, who, much like myself, is sort of just trying to get the hobby in and getting the head down and getting to get some stuff done, and his results are coming really, really well. I think his work, as you can see Richard's comments there, love these, more, we want more.
Is Willie Send 8th? Is that who he is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aye, yeah, his stuff's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I think Willie really benefits from the Discord voice chat. So getting on there and just chatting to everyone else and just hobbying away, it really gives him motivation, he said, and it really gives him the go to get stuff done. And this unit, it looks great. So if that Discord chat's helping anyone, then get on it.
Yeah,
I'm on it most days, so
I do keep an eye on it, and I don't tend to jump on and sit with nothing in case I'm doing something else and I don't want to have the microphone on. But I would just say, if you are part of that Discord, and I'll put the link up, I'll try and get that while these guys are chatting about the next bit, and just get on and try and just get involved, because it's quite fun. I actually benefit from that, and after this stream I will go on there for an hour or so and just have a bit of a chat. I've always done that after these streams, and it's quite a nice thing just to sort of have a catch up with folks. So try and add that into your diaries if you can. So now we're on to everyone's least favourite phase, the psychic phase. I will just go on a top rant, and I don't care if you disagree with me. As well, she's told me to be kinder to myself and say that people aren't likely to disagree with me. In this instance, I don't care if you disagree with me, because I hate the psychic phase. It's a phase that just completely passes me by. I've got World Eaters who don't have psychers, really. I've got Solar Auxilia who can't get them. I've got Talons of the Emperor who don't use them, and Space Wolves, the most I've ever run is probably 2 Rune Priests. I tend to kind of use it as I imagine the game intended it to do, which is it's a wee bit of a boost that someone can give you, or a wee bit of a psychic power, nerf your opponent a little bit, but with a small number of dice, and the Space Wolves themselves have rules that restrict them on the number of dice that they can throw at a power. It seems alright-ish. However, I just really think it is the worst phase in the game. I just really cannot get to grips with it. But I'll let these guys tell you how they use the psychic phase, which I imagine will be short and sweet because I don't think either of them do. And then we'll go on me, hopefully, not upsetting everyone by picking it apart. So Richard, psychers, how do you use them?
Yeah, I've used them a few times. But I think it's like you say, as intended. I use them for little buffs. In my impending militia list, I am planning getting a Knight Errant in there. to give me those little psychic boosts. Because I think that's what the best thing about that phase is that's what it's for. It'd be interesting to hear what you say about why you dislike it so much, Kieran. I've got some suggestions for you, so hopefully we can just keep you sane until then, okay?
Welshie, how do you use psychic phase?
I just use it for a laugh, man. Yeah, so I normally run a librarian with biomancy, or since Book 8 I've run him as a sanctic esoterist, because I quite like Gate of Infinity, quite like the idea of like, hey, surprise, now I'm over here, which is like tactically nonsense and gibberish, but it's a laugh, right, you know? So yeah, I use it for a bit of fun. I have beef with it, with the amount of randomness to it, not only during the game, but before the game. And we're just treading old ground again, so I apologise to people who are watching and to you too. But when we talk about Warlord traits, right, you should be able to pick that, and your psychic powers, you should be able to pick them, right? Because, like, you construct your army so lovingly and in great detail, and then you leave that to a D6 roll. It's stupid, right? But to counter my own point, not all psychic powers are made equally, are they?
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, you should be able to pick them, but they still have different points costs. So there's a bit of that. And then my final qualm with it is that if you're playing some armies, the psychic phase is just something that happens to you rather than something you're part of, which is absolutely jarring when I'm trying to play a game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's just like shit, right? You know what I mean? I feel like it could be integrated into the shooting phase and movement phase better rather than its own thing.
It used to be that way, so wasn't it?
Yeah, man. It
used to be.
And was it 4th edition where you had them and they were weapons that you could use?
Yeah, 4th or 5th, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So something like that I'd be up for. It's a bit much, right? Especially for Thousand Suns, which they are fuck off, Gary. Aye, like for Thousand Suns, right? So there are Marines who are consummate warriors and they're also cycles, and it's like, oh man, where's the downside to this? You know what I mean?
Do you know? Yeah. Do you know the qualm I have with it myself? Sorry, I'm just laughing at your emoji there, Kieran. I kind of feel like when you're in that, I don't mind the phase as a whole, right? I don't mind it. I don't mind coming across players like Thousand Sons of that who are supposed to be psychic masters or psychic masteries, whatever you want to call it. I don't mind that. Maybe that's because I play a lot of fantasy, so I come across that a lot in some games. But my problem with it is the way it's done. Like, I just feel it's wrong, and it needs a complete working on that level. And I think if that was done, maybe Kieran wouldn't feel so bad about that phase. Because let's face it, a Thousand Suns player, what's he did? He rolls 6 dice, and he generates his warp charge on a 4+. Let's say he gets 3 of those, right? Unless the target unit's another Psyker, got Adamantium Will, or his Brotherhood of Psykers, you're fishing for 3 6s to stop that. And that's my problem with that whole phase. It's just the fact that even if you've got Psykers, if they're not being targeted, usually you're fishing for 6s, and it's just crap. I'm sort of wondering if the way fantasy does it would be possible, where you generate a pool of Dispel and Power. So you roll 2d6. The Dispel pool is the 2 highest. The Power pool is just the whole lot. And then when you cast, the level of your caster is added to the roll you make for your spell. Now, obviously, if you don't have a caster, you're not getting any extra little bonuses. But if your opponent's rolled 3 dice, and it's a really bad spell for that situation, you could potentially have 6 dice you could use, or 5 dice. You're still getting a chance there. All you have to do is beat the roll. you're not just fishing for sixes.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
so you've taken the I'm not going to say the sting away. Like the phase itself at the moment, I just consider it just a bit crap. Like I just think it's if you cut that out the game,
mhm.
you're not really losing anything unless you're a Thousand Sons player. Or maybe a Sisters of Silence player, because there's nothing in that phase for the majority of players that's any particular interest. Like there's not really anything there that's exciting or fun.
No, I get that.
So what I personally would change is I would make psychic powers a lot better, but you don't get to shoot. I don't think you make a decision that whether you're using your mind bullets or whether you're using your bullets. I don't think that you should be able to do both, because it's quite clear that it's meant to be some sort of drain. It's meant to be some sort of like you're risking the warp consuming you. So the idea you can just like click your fingers and do it, well, my army does nothing. Like that phase, if you treat it as like a war, you're raising your hand doing something and then drawing your bolter and shooting me in the same movement almost. Like my space wolves are just standing there watching you do that while you're doing that, because my game's only movement, shooting, assault, and yours has now got an extra phase. So I think there's a complete sort of mistake in there. Like Welsh said, you could just integrate that into a different phase. Like I think it should be like if you want to have a guy that can shoot las cannons out his eyes, I'm cool with that. That doesn't bother me as long as there's a risk and as long as you pay points for that ability, which is maybe where I would go different to. Rather than saying you choose your powers, I would make them have a points cost. I think that would be more
I
interesting.
think that's what Welsh was saying. You could choose them, but give them a points cost too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be like it would be better. I think it's just
Absolutely.
as it stands, like Thousand Sons getting to shoot you twice potentially if you roll the powers is just weird. Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't really like there's a whole novels are dedicated to this legion is relying too heavily on psychic powers because they've basically stowed their bolters in their pockets and they're just using their powers all the time. It's not described as them sort of like I'm going to set you on fire and then I'm going to blast you with my bolter as well. So I think that would just be a better sort of, maybe even if you want to make it even more optional, is have you can shoot, you can psychic, you can shoot, then you can't assault, or you can shoot. You can psychic and assault and not shoot. Like I don't. That's making it a bit more convoluted, but essentially you should have to make a decision. I think that you can paying appropriately for them would make the game better. But I'd also, for an army that is psychic heavy, they've then taken away all that risk. And I know that the concept is that Thousand Sons are meant to be masters of the psychic ability, but they're not, and that's the lore. Like they've almost undone the lore by making them able to just ignore their first perils each turn and things like that. It's already a rare occurrence to then make it they can just be like, oh well, this book says nothing happens to me. Like the whole point was that it was meant to be by the time Prospero happened and they realize, well, they don't even realize it, still don't really realize they've been tricked. They're like setting themselves on fire, they're plugging themselves into titans that are making them go crazy, they're blowing up, they're mutating out of hand. Like they were totally tricked by Zincht to kind of fall in that way. And I think having perils be much worse and less avoidable would be more apt if you were able to shoot a las cannon out your eyes, because that kind of just makes it a lot better for me. And then the last sort of rant, I guess, is just denying. I think you've covered it, Richard. I think denying should be a lot easier. There's loads. You take that Astartes short film series, the guy gets stuck and he's like just about to stab the guy in the face and he's frozen, and just through pure willpower he manages to like wrench himself free or cause a distraction that manages to get him free. Like the whole lore of a Space Marine is built on that sort of ability to just shrug off horrible wounds or horrible things that happen to them. So I just think it should just be a straight, you don't even have a pool. If someone casts an offensive power on you, like a debuff or a psychic power, you just roll a dice and on a 6 it just doesn't happen. And you can make it better if you've got like items in your demonology or whatever, you want to bring in the items to do that. So
the other option I was going to put in for that would be like they do in 9th. It's
damn.
So let's just imagine you've cast a power, and it's like you have to roll off. It'll have like a warp charge level. So I say it's 6. You roll 2 dice, you beat 6, so it goes off. And if there's an enemy psychic within 24 inches, they can try and deny it by just rolling higher than you. For some people, that might remove a bit of interaction because it's quite simple.
Yeah.
But
It's still interaction, no, mate. It's like 100% more interactive than the current system, right?
Yeah, because like when I'm in a game, even though I don't mind going against psychers, when it comes to me denying a power, I just don't care because I know I'm fishing for 6s, and I just what's the point? Do you know what I mean? So
I tend to just switch off when I'm playing against cycles, and like if it's only one, it's fine. But if somebody's got loads, I just zone out and just let them tell me what's happening, man.
But I think that's down to the sort of preparation. So in our group, not the Gary that's just come in and insulted us and then gone quiet, the other Gary, original Gary as we call him, he was very organised with these psychic powers. And I remember playing him in games where like his psychic phase would take him, he would be casting 5-6 powers or more. It'd take him like 2 minutes because he would just be he'd tell you what he was doing, he'd roll the dice and he'd put the card down next to the unit, he'd move on. What I find in the game, we have, and some people, and it might be because they need a little bit of extra time, it might be that they've not quite been following what's going on. I find there's times in games where people make up their mind at the start of that phase what they're going to do, whereas I'm a bit more analytical and I'll be thinking, right, Richard's moved that unit there, I'm assuming he's going to shoot there, what will I do on my turn to try and stop him moving up the board? Some people can't work like that, and I think the psychic phase does them no favours, because then they're deciding the powers they're going to use. They get their I've seen sheets of paper that people get and they're ticking off powers, and it's the way they keep track of things. But as an opponent in a game which is meant to be really sort of like, these games are so short in the sort of skirmish sense, you're only getting 5 blasts of your gun before the game's over in most cases. Just slows the game down to a crawl for me. So I think that's, being organised can counter quite a lot of our rage against this phase, but that's the rules' fault, not the gamer's fault, when the game encourages you to sort of have to be so organised that you've got like you almost need like a second player next to you who'll like do that phase for you because they've been sitting watching, analysing in the background. So we've got a good point from Struan there, which of if you assign psychic powers to a particular phase and did it then, so you can use smite in the shooting phase. Instead of moving, you can use the teleport or pause. You can use iron arm before a charge. I think if you did that and you had your pull at the start of the turn, it'd be interesting to see as you get through the turn what you keep back, because that could shaft you then, because then you're like, well, I won't use my, I don't know, smite. I'll keep 4 dice back so I can do iron arm. Like something like that would be quite interesting to see. It would make it more of a choice. But
well, sorry.
No,
I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure, like, she said 5th, 4th edition, your psychic powers were put into a certain phase. Yep. And correct me if I'm wrong, Welshie, was it not a leadership check?
It was a leadership check to get them off, yep.
Yeah. Yep. So that would take away that issue you're seeing there, Kira, if we did that.
I think it is just the interactiveness. Like that's the beef I've got. It's nothing to do with, like, because the powers as they are, I would say in about 50% of games I've played, the person who has lots of psychers never gets the power they want. And you can see it on their face. Like, they roll the dice, and then they've probably got like, a couple of offensive ones, but they were really going for one of the sort of stronger ones, and they just haven't got it. And you're just like, it's almost ruins their game, because they probably invested quite a lot of their strategy in getting this ability. And then I'm sort of like, well, there's nothing I can do to help you, because like I've not got anything that interacts with you. So I think that's where my main beef is. So it's not that bad of a rant. Don't get me wrong, like it is part of the game as it is. If I was to change one thing, it would be the psychic phase. That's my number one, because I would run them in my non-world eaters, but if Solar Auxilia could get them, I probably would run them. And Space Wolves have had a history, as Stevens pointed out, of having quite cool interactions with that phase. Like you could just ignore a power on a 4-up because he'd hold these little runic staff up in the sky, and everyone within 24 inches you could once per turn deny the power to stop it happening. Like that sort of giving armies that interaction with a phase when it suits, like White Scars would benefit from that because they had that same sort of shamanistic approach to it. And you could have like Imperial Fists just don't, because they just don't believe in magic. I think that's where you could have quite a swing in the game, but it's not that bad. Hopefully no one seems to be arguing in the chat about it, so I think nobody finds that phase particularly good.
To provide a counterpoint as well, because I do believe in fairness, so we've spent a lot of time there arguing against Psychers, but you kind of just touched on it there. If you don't get the powers you want, it's fucking shit, right? And the best example I can use is if you're a Word Bearers player, pre-Book 8, when only Word Bearers could summon demons, right? And you wanted to summon demons, so you'd buy a Psyker, paint them, you'd then buy some demons, paint them, right? And you might think, okay, I'll build like 3 brutes, 5 beasts, 10 lesser demons, and 1 greater demon, because that's what I can summon. And then you might never roll the dice to get any of them. You might just roll the dice and get the stupid power that like lets you steal a wound off of somebody. So that's loads of hobby hours down for a really cool thematic force that never sees a table because you didn't roll the right D6 number. So there is an element where it's not good enough for people, and there's an element where it's too good for people. And just wanted to get that counterpoint across.
Yeah. Well, I think
just in the interest of being fair, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but to be fair, I did say like make powers better. I think if you're going to make it something that is a choice, you have to, because the powers as they are, a lot of the offensive ones are actually quite crap. Like none of them are particularly high, like low AP. I don't know whether you say I say a low AP for like AP2, AP1. Some people say it's a high AP, whatever. None that are particularly armor ignoring at long range and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's where you need to balance it more and make it more interesting for the player that's using it, because that would be better. Like if you're running Raptora from the Thousand Suns and you want to be blasting like fireballs around the battlefield, I think that's Raptora, then it should be doable. But the game allows you to roll dice on like to pick powers on a different chart. It doesn't really, like, it should be quite structured, because the whole point is you've spent this time reading your little magic book and now you can cast the spells. So anyway, I think we can leave it there unless anyone's got anything amazing to add to the psychic phase.
No, not really. I just think we're the 3 of us anyway are sort of on the same path on it. It needs a redo, but we also see there's both negatives and positives to get done to it, you know. So it's good.
Hey lads, I'm going to have to go. My missus needs to go down our sister's phone an ambulance, so
okay.
Kids. Okay. So I did say, I know I said earlier on I was going to log off at 8:30 as well, but actually, coincidentally, I need to go.
You head off. It is a-okay. This is real life is more important.
Yeah.
But good chat, man. I quite enjoyed that. So I'll see you next time.
Okay. Yeah. See you later.
Right.
See you later, mate.
Okay, I won't shuffle those things about because, apart from I will actually, because there's one right over my head, which is not so good. But if we move on to the shooting phase, yeah, that looks brilliant. I should just leave that. It's almost like my new look. Let's see if I can get. So if you go on to the shooting phase, which incidentally is probably Welsh's favourite phase because he runs warriors and stuff. So I probably approach this much like anyone else. I don't think there's anything surprising there. You sort of start with your most important stuff. It's like Blood Bowl. If anyone plays Blood Bowl, I like to think I've kind of got to grips with that rule set in that you want to do your best odds things first. So if I've got 20 guys and they need to kill 3 models, I'll probably shoot that unit first if that's what I'm planning on doing, just so that I don't because if it goes wrong, I need a reserve unit to step up and do the second best thing that I can do that turn. So if it was something like 10 las cannons must shoot that rhino to pop it open, because then these 20 tactical marines are going to absolutely bolter the insides to death. You obviously have to do it in a certain order. You can't do the bolters first because they're not done the thing yet. So it'd be sort of like pie plate a unit. If I've got like a Vindicator and a good shot, I would do that first, because if you do anything else, you might reduce the effectiveness of that pie plate. If you know you're going to get 10 guys, what's the point of shooting a squad at them first? Because then you're only going to get 7 guys. So it's that sort of mindset that I would do it with. But the only thing I've noticed, and I think this is quite common in Heresy, it's common in our group anyway when we're playing here, some folk always save that sort of fancy shot till last. Like when you need to kill a super heavy and your contemptor is your only hope. So you've done everything. You've sort of shot, I don't know, 5 las cannons at a Typhon. You've taken it down to like 1 hull point. You've got a contemptor that's got a twin link las cannon. People don't tend to jump to the contemptor with a 1 shot. They go on and do the rest of their turn, their shooting phase, and then they do that last. And I never quite understand why that is, because you still get the benefit of a scatter if you blow it up. The Typhon could scatter onto something and get a D-hit on something. But it seems like I've noticed that in quite a lot of games where it's almost like because you know it's unlikely, because something could go wrong, you kind of leave that till the last roll. I don't really know why that is, but if anyone has any insight, that would be interesting to hear.
I guess psychologically as well, you've already decided in your head that's doing that, so you leave it behind and you go on to the stuff you need to work out. I've never really noticed that, but who says I'm observant? So.
And how do you approach that phase then? Obviously, you've got all your units sat at the back of the board because you're a manky, filthy toad. But how else do you do that phase?
It's a bit boring, but it's essentially the same as you. It's target priority. You start off with what you know you need to kill and how you're going to kill it, and that's it. And then you just work through. There's nothing really I can add to that. That's pretty much it. I think we all play it the same way. I think it's just basic tactics at the end of the day. So I think everyone's pretty clued up on that.
Have you seen anyone play that phase? I wouldn't say badly, but like it's probably the one phase in the game that I don't tend to see. Maybe someone would pick a unit that I wouldn't shoot at with something, but generally, I don't think people would sort of like just cock it up. Like I've probably seen sometimes I've had someone who maybe they'll have misjudged the range, which is strange when you can pre-measure in Heresy, but like they'll assume their bolters are in range of a unit, so they'll do lots of other things, and then they'll come to that, and they sometimes have tripped themselves up. But in essence, you were never in range, so you've not really lost anything, unless you would have been better, like, I don't know, plasma cannoning or auto-cannoning a unit. I've never really seen anyone do anything that I've sort of, at the end of that phase, gone, wow, I would definitely not have done that. What about you?
Yeah, I've actually. I don't know what it is, but like people like, let's say they've got like a super heavy and it's got like 2 wounds left. I've seen somebody shoot like last cannons at guys, or like not even just last, like even like what was it? There was something else. I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was quads with charter shells. So they had enough quad charter shells to take out a super heavy, just finish it off. But they decided they wanted to shoot them at like tacticals because the tacticals were closer. But in my head, you're better off getting rid of that super heavy because you've got more options along the rest of the field and models available to take out those tacticals after. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think people get upset. As a dice, the more dice you roll, the better you generally do in this game. I think is the fair way of putting it. And obviously, that's Space Marine on Space Marine, where you everyone knows the 4-4-4, blah blah blah, all that stuff chart, that the stat lines they have. And I guess as someone who's run Solar Auxilia, and their line infantry are pretty crap in the grand scheme of things. They're hitting on 4s, then they're wounding on 5s. That dice pool, it becomes much more stark when you play a non-bolter armed model, and I think that's where it really hits home. Like Space Marines are like that. That's again is sort of that D6 thing I've been saying. Like it's if you can, a bolter can wound nearly everything from like a grot all the way nearly a Castellax on a 6 still. Is that the last thing it could
Yeah.
build? Because of it goes 6 then 6. And I think that's where, like, if you've got something like a Las Rifle, which is only strength 3, so you can't hurt a Castellax at all, and then you're barely hurting Space Marines, I think that's where the sort of, you are relying on big pools of dice. And even, like, if you are a Space Marine player, you're still fishing for 6s to wound that Castellax and hoping it fails its armor save. But it feels like that is where Heresy, for me, would benefit most from that sort of change in the dice system that I'm talking about. Like, if you made, say it was a D8, and you made Marines still hit on 3s.
Yeah.
So they're still hit. They're getting a little bit of a boost because now it's a 1 in 4 chance of not hitting, but you kept it as a 4+ for Militia or Solar Aurelia, so they're still staying at 50%. So it's that sort of thing. Well, she's just chopped into the. I don't know. We kicked him off because he was shite. So I think that's where I would argue about the dice could be looked at. I still don't have the answer. Like, I don't think that's the automatic thing, but one of the things actually was quite interesting in the shooting phase that came to me, and this is what, when Heresy was announced, they had the armor marks. I think if James was here, he'd know better than me. But when they had Mark 2 to 6 on Forge World's website, I wondered if they were going to do different rules for the armor. And that's where I thought you could have had quite an interest in, if you changed the rules for that dice system so there was a better spread. Like, giving a Mark 3 a slightly better armor save but a reduction in your movement or initiative, whereas Mark 4 would maybe make you faster but make your save slightly worse. Like, that's where I don't think it'll work. I don't think that'll happen on because the game is complicated enough without being like, oh yeah, I've accidentally, because I've got guys right here, I've got Mark 2 and Mark 4 that are probably going to be in the same squad. Like, I think that looks cool. I don't think you should have just pure Mark 4 and pure Mark 2 and pure Mark 3. And I think that's not going to work. But
I think you would need the granular dice or something granular to achieve that.
Yeah. But that's where I kind of feel like the system would benefit maybe being a bit richer as a concept if you did have a system that sort of encouraged. And it would also benefit that sort of, like, well, Death Guard predominantly used Mark 3, that not always, and you can still use other marks, but that thing comes together. But that's kind of an aside from the shooting phase. It was something that popped into my head while I was writing some thoughts down. In the shooting phase, one of the biggest changes, and people might not like this element, but I think you should just take away who you want when you die. I think the idea that it's always the closest is really boring. Like, I think it fits the rules and it fits the idea. Like, it stops you getting a charge, which is good, because you shouldn't. If I'm 2 inches away from you and I've got one guy 2 inches away and somehow the rest of them are all conga lined away, I shouldn't be taking the guys at the back, because that's not really that doesn't really make sense, especially because then are you saying you can take people out of gun range, etc., etc. Like, it starts to get stupid. But I feel like in the game it would be better to try and speed it up a bit, because there's definitely times I've played games where there'll be a line of 3 guys and one's slightly further forward. I just find that really, like, my opponent, I'm not saying anyone's cheating, but if there's 3 guys in a sort of semi-perfect line and one of them's got a power fist, it's never that one that dies in the first or the second shot. And I just think it would just save a lot of mucking about in that sort of mindset if you were just allowed to pick. Because it just doesn't really work for me. And one of the sort of most underused rule in the game, precision strike and precision shot, would just be infinitely better. If I could be like, I'm shooting the guy with the Vexilla and there's nothing you can do about it. That would just be much better. Because then that stops me being like, all right, so the closest guy was this guy who's got a bolter, I'll just take him. Like, I think there's sort of, I think there's something in there.
I totally agree with you. That's one of the refreshing rules I find playing 9th. is that you pick the model that dies.
Yeah.
Now I know thematically, they're from the direction they're getting shot. That's why it's there. But like, it's so annoying when your plasma guy dies. Are you telling me that the next Marine doesn't know how to use that plasma gun? He can't pick it up and just shoot it. Same with the Vixilla. Oh, the Vixilla guy's died. Oh well. I'll just leave that behind. I'm not going to pick it up. And it'll also cut down on this. Like, I do it. Everyone does it. It's the Artificer Armor Sergeant tanking 20 shots. That's not thematic. In the same respect as shots from the front is thematic.
Yeah. I think that's so. Welsh is still feeding in. He's saying like it just makes you put your heroic guys at the back, which is the kind of the counter to what you're saying, but the same idea there. It doesn't suit like the idea that a Space Marine sergeant standing at the front and it's like ding 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 ding. Like that's pretty cool, but as a game mechanic, it's like this guy has taken all these bolter shots and he's still perfectly fine and he's still running about.
Oh yeah. When I say it's not thematic, I mean as in he's essentially turning into a colander, but he's alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is thematic when your guys lead from the front. And I think by choosing the guys that die, you'll see more people lead that cool squad with the guy in the front sometimes. And it'll stop that mucking about, because that just uses up time.
Yeah, I think so. Bing Bong Heresy disagrees in terms of the sort of it's a risk reward by having the Artificer armor at the front. I agree with that. I think there is those times you roll a 1 on the very first dice. That's fine. That doesn't. I'm not so much against that as an element. Finn says like there's loads of those weird little issues that slow the game down. I think that is what bugs me the most, because it's if I've shot you with 40 bolters or doing Fury Legion at you and you're rolling each dice 1 at a time, and that's so tedious to watch until you finally roll a 1. Like it just doesn't speed the game up. I understand completely what Bing Bong Heresy is saying about sort of you've been bold enough to put the guy at the front. You've paid the points for it. That's your risk reward. It does. I'm going to argue with him. If I could find a way of getting you into Discord, I think it does take a long time to roll.
It does when you're playing against a 10-man Volkite Culverin squad.
Yeah.
Then you're rolling 40 shots.
Yeah.
One after the other.
I think that's where it doesn't quite. I'll move your thing out of the way, Richard. You're getting blindsided.
No, it's okay.
It just doesn't. It doesn't do it for him. I think that slows the game down a bit too much when you get into the sort of like my example of you got 3 guys that are roughly in a line. Oh look, you've taken away the 2 that have the crapper guns. Like that. I just don't. It would just remove that ill feeling that I would probably have towards someone, just to be like, nah, it's cool, on you go. You're going to leave him because he's got a power fist. I understand that. That makes sense. Rather than me maybe being like, now we have to get the tape measure out because I'm pretty sure that guy's the closest. And I just don't like that mechanic. I think that's the bad thing about it. So I think that's kind of, other than on a totally side tangent, I'll let people catch up in the chat if they want. Cover saves on a vehicle are just crap. It's just pointless. I feel like they should just get something like, if they're in, they just treat them like infantry for ease if you want. I know that ruins and rubble, a little crater. Well, a crater giving infantry a save's a bit rubbish anyway, because you don't tend to see Marines throwing themselves prone into a crater. But it would just speed the game up a bit to not have to be thinking about vehicles like that. I would probably just do that just to make it a bit easier, like infantry.
Yeah.
And maybe have something about smoke launchers that isn't, instead of shooting, some other mechanic for them.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. Like, why would you? Why is activating your smoke launcher? Surely that's just like a one-press button. Do you know what I mean? Surely one guy could just go deep, and the rest of the guys can shoot those guns, or they're automated. You know, it's just a bit random.
So I think that's it. Lee's sort of said what I said. Normal wins, the controller picks the death position shots, the shooter chooses. I think there's something in the mechanism there. Oh, what's that?
Cover should
Well, she's agreeing. I don't know if he's agreeing with Finn or he's agreeing with Lee.
Cover should be a modifier to hit.
Yeah, maybe. I think it works in Necromunda. I think it slows the game down a bit. Like in Necromunda, it makes sense because it's one model shooting, you can measure it. But Heresy does seem to work on a sort of majority cover saves, majority toughness to speed the game up. So majority cover save wouldn't be particularly challenging to do.
Interestingly, in 9th, cover gives you +1 to your armor, which is really simple. But would it? But do you know what? I don't know. For a game like Heresy, where it's all thematically narrative and all this, I don't know. Cover doesn't really help your armor, does it? So it's not. It's not the answer. It's not the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think there's something just quite not quite right about it. But we'll not. Hopefully, we'll get Bing Bong Heresy into the voice chat after this, and we can have a debate. Hopefully, no fall. Hopefully, no Battermate at the next event.
Something about the shooting phase I was going to mention, right? And I've noticed it a lot in our little group. And I think it's more based on people doing themselves out. So, and it's the forgetting of the rule that you can't kill something if you can't see it. Now,
would you get rid of that rule though, or would you keep it?
No, I'd keep it because it makes sense. I'm just meaning, as we're discussing the phase, it's just something that does everyone realise that's how it works? Well, and what I mean by that is, like, let's say you've got a blob of 10 guys, 2 of them are behind a cover, and you're shooting this squad, okay? And your guys can only see the front 8. I see a lot of players, they'll suffer like 10 wounds, 12 wounds, and they'll take the whole lot. Forgetting that actually you should still have 2 guys because the wounds won't spill because you can't see those guys.
There's also the shooting with the range as well. Like I don't tend to see people having some people don't take the time to think about the gun. So if you're getting shot with bolters and like some people aren't in the 24-inch range, that's what people forget as well. Like you don't want to do yourself out of a couple of guys because then you might be able to steal an objective or something at the end of the game if you don't run away. So there's definitely an element there about and it's not, I don't think it's just that people, when you see you've got to roll 3 million saves, sometimes you just want to just scoop the guys into a bucket. But it's important sometimes just to think about the range. And I think that's one of the elements, again, it's to speed the game up. If you've got that one guy who's within 24 of everyone and the game's kind of just saying to you, everyone's dead, I think that's a bit, I'm not sure I like that. Like it almost feels like you should just, I wouldn't want to slow the game down because I do think there's a lot of things to work through, but you'd almost think that you would have like those two, that guy who's in range of everyone should roll separately or last or a separate colour or something, but maybe I'm making the game far too complicated than it needs to be.
No
one has said anything about that, so I'll take that as a good sign. And so nothing else in the shooting phase from you?
No. I like the shooting phase as it is for the most part. There's nothing really that I would change or want to change. One that's really not ever really sat right with me is when you go to ground and you start snap firing. When you choose to do it, I just feel like snap firing when you choose to go to ground is just a bit severe.
Would you say not being able to move the next turn would be better?
I would say so, yeah. Or something like -1 to your shot rather than straight up. You're just hitting 6s. I can understand going to ground when you're getting pinned and taking that penalty. But would that make going to ground too strong? Possibly.
I feel like something like not moving, I don't know, like it kind of, it makes it more military-esque, like getting cover. Then you still get up with your las cannons and shoot back. Like it probably benefits units that aren't going to move too much. But I don't know what. I agree. I think it can be, and the problem is because it all stacks. So if you're already on a 4-up cover save and you go to ground and you get your 3-up, and it's a bit too good to then get to shoot back at normal sort of shots. But I don't know what I feel like in such a short game, and that's one of the sad things about Heresy for me, is it's quite a short game really. Like you can make a mistake on turn 2 or 3 in terms of your movement. That means that unit now doesn't achieve anything during the game. And then that's a shame. And I think that's where, again, like, the game rewards you obliterating, like, overkilling, making sure nobody survives going to ground this for covers from Welshie. I think that's the good and the bad in one big cup of Heresy, is like, my 10 las cannons have just completely obliterated that Contemptor, haha, because I've got 10 of these guys that are super trained. But on the other hand, it is that kind of sadness of, I've got one here, I'm not nearly done painting it, it's not got any arms yet. I've spent ages painting this bloody model and you've killed it on turn 1. Like, it's one of the saddest bits of the hobby, the curse of the sort of freshly painted model. But you can't get away from it being like the beauty of Heresy. Like, I've got a sea of guys down here that I'm working on, and it's really cool when you get to see them run across the board and do stuff. But they do have to die. That's the game. But I just don't know if I can see a way of sort of giving a unit a benefit of cover or something to hide behind as they charge across the board, but then not making my opponent have a really crap game because their firing is now just completely ineffectual. It's definitely a shooting game. Like, the rule set completely supports shooting over everything. Assault is secondary in my opinion. So I don't know what else you could change without really sort of tipping it on its head, and then you make assault far too good.
No.
Okay.
I just thought I'd throw that spanner in there.
Nobody else has going to ground us for cowards, and then Struan is corrected to pragmatists. True. I agree with Struan. Don't do it very often though. Like, I think that's what's wrong with the rule. I don't do it.
No, because I always wait up and I'm like, is it worth going to ground? Not really.
Yeah, especially
you know what I mean. The squad's going to die at this point anyway, so I may as well get the last couple of shots out.
I think that's it, and I think that's it's bad because you don't get to use it. That's kind of the problem. Although, like, Solar Auxilia behind a defence line, I can see all the benefit of that, but it's not really. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's something in there. I think you're right, but I'm not quite sure what the answer is, and hopefully the chat will let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on shooting?
No, we've covered it. I mean, the other one was running, but we've covered that. That should be in the movement phase.
Should definitely be in there. So in assault, and I've probably played more assaulty armies, looking over as if like everyone can see what I'm looking at. So I've got like Custodes are quite good on the charge if they get there. World Eaters are very good on the charge when they get there. Space Wolves aren't too bad either on the charge, so I guess I'm drawn to armies that have got a bit of a chance in assault. Then I've got Solar Auxilia. Solar Auxilia do not like to charge. Definitely don't. Prefer to be at the very back of the board. So there's not really anything I would say is surprising about my approach. I like to use the unit that can afford to take an Overwatch hit that surprises you. Whether you've got to sacrifice one individual unit, like one model, so that the Overwatch gets them, or whether you just chuck in the 20-man blob because you know you're not going to lose enough guys to stop the charge. And then you get the benefit if your opponent's like, oh, I'm not going to shoot this one guy, I'll wait for the 20-man to charge. And if you get in with a one guy, you're laughing. It's a bit of a bad mechanic, but I don't really see what you can fix with it, because I don't think you should get to. It shouldn't all be treated at the same time, because you're obviously going to Overwatch the one thing that you're going to want to blast. So it kind of works and it doesn't. It works in the sort of, haha, I've tricked you kind of way, but it doesn't work in the way of like it's already sixes to hit. Then
Mhm.
you've got to roll to wound, then they get an armor save against most stuff. So by the time
Yeah.
you've actually done it and gone through all the rigmarole, you've probably only like killed one guy. It doesn't really like do
Yeah.
anything. So it doesn't feel like Overwatch works, but I do quite like Assault being quite cutthroat. Like it's kind of meant to be. So obviously, like I've said, it's a very shooting game. So having Assault be very dramatic, like
Mhm.
I beat you to death and you've lost half your guys and you run away. That sort of thing does work for me. But yeah, I don't know what you think about sort of how you approach. I've kind of glossed over how you approach the assault phase, but I don't think it will be anything particularly different.
Nah, not really. Because I don't actually run that many assault units in my Alpha Legion. They're more of a Legion where I just stand back and shoot you to bits. So, but just going on about the Overwatch, I think the simplest solution to that problem is just saying it's sort of like the super heavy thing. You know how you've got to declare all your targets with your guns before you start to roll? They should just make it that you have to declare all your charges into that squad before you roll.
And then you would let people Overwatch anyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you just choose the one.
Yeah, like it wouldn't bother me that much. I do kind of like that mechanic where like the one guy you've ignored makes it in and stops you overwatching. But I can understand why like he's base contact with like 3 guys, so the other 7 guys in the squad should not be so worried about it that they just completely disregard what's going on around them as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's just something that kind of works and it doesn't. Some bits are good and some bits are bad. There's loads of comments of Overwatch going around scatter dice. If I run across the board, you shouldn't get to shoot me again from Finn, which I guess makes sense. Lee agrees. Surprisingly, Lee plays Raven Guard, so it's not a big shock. I don't know why Finn's moaning about it. He plays armies. I guess he does move forward. He's meant to sit at the back of the board, but he moves forward. Welsh's comments. Oh, on you go.
No, on you go. Just read them. That's fine.
Welsh's comments make sense about you should always charge a minimum of 6, or whatever your movement is. So that I think when you fail a 3 or a 4-inch charge, it is really shit. I think it's a bit like it doesn't really add up to, especially in a 5 or 6 turn game. You've spent all that time getting there, and then my Space Wolves somehow do not make the final charge, even with Lehman Russ in there because he can't use his fleet because he's part of the squad, and there's just not, it doesn't work.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
And then
just on the Overwatch point, interesting with everyone saying, well, not everyone, a couple of people are saying bin it. When I read the rules for 9th edition, right, I was really surprised. Right? honestly, bear with me here, right? I was really surprised because I couldn't find the Overwatch rule, and I was like, "Where's this rule gone?" And you have to pay a stratagem to Overwatch, which I found really odd. So I'm wondering what the thought path with that was in that game.
Yeah, I wonder.
And how would you? What? But you wouldn't want to bin it off straight. You wouldn't want to. I don't think you want to bin it off.
Yeah,
completely.
I think so. Stratagems could make sense. I think if you were to go down the stratagem point, there'll be some people who'll argue you should only get a very small pool because that's what worked in 9th now. One of them, 8th or 9th, one of them had lots of stratagems and one of them had next to it. So I've just noticed how small you are on the screen, Richard. I'm not like deliberately trying to dominate the side of the size of the chat.
I'm a small guy.
I'm not like in any way trying to shove you out slowly. I'll just keep moving it further and further over and push you. Yeah, I think there's stratagems you could argue you should get quite a lot, in which case Overwatch would be one you could spam. But the other side of that, I think it's again you're just making this bookkeeping mess that's not very good. Let's see what else we got. So we've got some weapons shouldn't be able to Overwatch. Yeah, probably. I think like a heavy weapon or something. Like most people have a bolt pistol and a las cannon, or like so if you're getting charged and you could only do the bolt pistol shots, that's probably fine. And I don't mind. Yeah, you could even bring in like the Zone Mortalis initiative test or something like to be able to shoot properly. Like it doesn't. I don't know. I think that if you limited the guns, you could make it better. That's what I'm kind of getting at there.
Yeah. I get you. I remember one game. I always remember this was Gary Crossley was charging me with his Praetor into my Iron Havocs, and I had 3 last cannons left, and I snap fired them all on the charge in Overwatch and killed him.
Well, like, so in a way,
that's funny, right? I'll always remember that. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, is that realistic that they've managed to like flick around these heavy last cannons, snap fired him? Nah, not really.
I think there is the moment, you obviously remember it when it doesn't happen to you as well. Like, it's funny because it doesn't, but I think there is an element of that sort of. It's almost like the game is trying to give you the Hail Mary, like, oh, this is never going to work. This one guy with a las cannon's never going to hit that Praetor and kill him.
Yeah.
Then you do it, and it probably is meant to be encouraging those sort of moments where after the game you like, can't believe I did that. Wait till I tell everyone. Sort of take pictures of the guy with the las cannon and the dead on the table. But I don't. Yeah, it's not a mechanic that I see why they've made it 6s to hit, but it's almost like reactionary fire. Like, why are they so crap at it? Like, someone's charging you across the, like, even in, like, it was the anniversary of Culloden, like, earlier in April, like, even they could, like, shoot their guns as the people were running across the board at like the moss at them. So it just doesn't make sense that you're suddenly crap at shooting. And also Lee's point there, if you're an inch away, why can you Overwatch at all? I think maybe that's the bit that I'm kind of getting at myself, is if you're far enough away, you should get full ballistic skill, but if you're too close, maybe you just don't get to shoot at all. And then you've upset poor Gary by saying stratagems, and he's not very happy. Whatever.
Who cares?
Yeah. So I would say, like, the mechanic of our weapons are useless isn't very fun. Like, I think it's essential, but I don't like how bad it is. Like, I think I would probably never make that decision unless I was so confident that unit was going to get away. So if I had 2 units locked in combat with a Contemptor and I could save one of them, that would make sense. But I just don't, like, it's just kind of crap. It's almost like it rewards too much in assault. Like, if you've got a Contemptor that's about to kill 20 tactical marines and they go, well, I better take the gamble, and then it catches them and kills them all. Like, again, it's that sort of risk reward, but it just feels a bit over the top. Like, I almost feel like you could just have them, they automatically break, but you don't chase them down somehow. I guess that's like, that imbalances close combat, because then at the end of close combat you could just be like, well, I'm running away. But I almost feel like it would be better if you could do it like our weapons are useless. Could be a complete, everyone can do it. Because I think you can opt to fail the morale check at the end of combat, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. But
I'm not sure actually.
Well, if not, that's what I'm getting at. I think, like, to be able to say, I want to keep my guys if I can, or they'll be better for me next turn, so I'm going to run away.
So I think you can only opt to fail when you're in that situation that our weapons are useless.
So I think there could be a strategy in falling back when you're in it. Like, if you charge me on your turn, and then you do a bit of a number on me, I probably wouldn't want to run away. But if I charge you on your turn and then opt to fail, I think there's maybe too much of a strategy at play there. You probably could game it by, if I charge you and then opt to fail, then my unit could be better by my turn, sort of thing. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just reaching for bad ideas. But I do feel like you should be able to run away all the time. I don't really see the benefit of, like, if you've got 10 power fists on Terminators and I'm like normal Marines, I don't really think I'd stand about and let you smash me until suddenly my guy go, you know what, this is a terrible idea, let's run away off the battlefield. It should be like, almost like the captain or whatever in charge could say, come on boys, we'll fall back and then we'll shoot them next turn, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Right, hold that thought a minute, because I'm going to turn my light on. It's getting dark in here.
Okay.
That's better. Look, I've got a halo now. I'm a holy toad. There we go. Yeah, so sort of like in so you're talking of like what's the word I'm looking for? Jeez. So like in 9th and 8th, you can opt to fall back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, your loving for 9th edition amazes us all.
I know.
But it's, I think, like, to be able to, you wouldn't stay in a combat that was going to lead to you just being meat ground by other guys. Like, it makes no sense to,
Yeah.
that's almost like fearless by default. Like, it's not it's stupid that you want to fail the test, but you pass. Like, you should be in control of your units. It shouldn't be up to a dice to see if you can run away.
So if you do that, and so what you're saying about you don't know if you pulling back would give you the benefit of the next turn, are you meaning like in charging in, giving you the option to make another charge?
That's what I don't quite know. Maybe the strategy just doesn't exist. Of if you fall back on, so you charge me on your turn, I fall back. Well, I've got to take a morale check anyway to regroup. If I charge you on my turn, and then at the end of that combat I fall back, you've still got a turn to get me. So maybe it doesn't work in the rules, and maybe that's why it just isn't a consideration.
It would probably have to be something like in 9th where if you opt to fall back, your next turn, I'm pretty sure you can't charge.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Something like that. So you need something like that in there. But I understand where you're coming from with this mechanic.
It just feels like you're not in charge of your guys, which is the whole point of building and painting them. Stephen's saying you wouldn't want to fall back when you could still win versus Terminators. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not on a Terminator bashing session or anything, but just kind of that idea of if you've got like 10 of them, they've killed 10 of your guys, and you've got 10 left, you might want to save them. You might not just want to stand there and then next turn lose another 10. So that's what I'm kind of getting at. So challenges are something that should on paper be really fun, but I just find them to be a bit weak. They're usually over in either one turn or they take the whole game. Primarch on Primarch challenges should be like the epitome of the game. It should be the most beautiful thing to see on the battlefield, and I would say nearly every time it's crap. Like, it just doesn't, cause of that exact thing I've just said. You can't run away. So if you're in a complete mismatch of a conflict, you can't even be like, oh, I'll just leave, because you're stuck there, because you're both fearless. You're there till someone dies, and in a short game, that can be game over, because your strategy completely goes out the window at that point, unless you've got hit and run, of course. But that's where it doesn't really, just doesn't, like, they used to have it in the Struans, kind of beat me to the punch there. They used to have the ability to influence a challenge by the number of people on the outskirts. And that was when you couldn't, like, the challenge was all that mattered, and you couldn't interact with it. I'm not sure I like that over, like, I don't imagine many legions, like Iron Warriors, wouldn't care if Perturabo was fighting. They'd be still boltering or stabbing or punching the guys. Space Wolves might be a bit more like, let's watch Leman Russ fight because he's the best. But it doesn't, it just doesn't really, like, because nearly every challenge I've seen, one person knows they're going to win it. It just doesn't really work as that mechanic, and that's what annoys me about it. So I'm just doing a cough there. And I think that element of refusing, there's a wee bit of clarity needed. So it says you can't use the leadership, and they can't fight, but it doesn't say anything about your abilities. So if you're if you've got a chaplain and you say no, that unit's still fearless, and I think that should be, you just don't influence at all. You shouldn't get any special rules. You shouldn't get, if you do it with like Alfarius for some reason, like the fact, well, your army gets preferred enemy when he's on the board, I think, but he's a bad example. But if it was something that gave you preferred enemy, you shouldn't get it, and it should just be like, that should be. Maybe even you use, as Struan again's beat me to the punch, you use the lowest leadership in the squad or something, because the squad is like, oh well, that praetor that's come along with us is a complete coward, and the captain of the squad's embarrassed, so it's like you have to use the base marine leadership for the rest of the fight. Just doesn't really, I don't know, it just doesn't do it. It just doesn't. I don't think I've ever had a challenge other than the ones that are shorter are better, because I'm that you've got a power axe, but I've got a power sword, and I just kill you.
Mm.
That is more sort of choice, but it's not narrative. And the Primarch on Primarch one should be really like, oh, brilliant, we're going to see who's the best. And nearly every game, neither of them die. Like, you get to the last turn and they're still locked in combat, and it's been pointless. So I don't know, there's something not quite, doesn't really work there.
No.
Um,
It's interesting about the leadership thing, about when you decline the challenge. Because fantasy stipulates that you lose any abilities.
I'm
You're
pretty sure,
getting off your
'cause
guy.
I'm pretty sure it does say you can't use a leadership.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it right now. So you would, like you said, you would think you should lose those abilities as well, like fearless or whatever.
Like, you can refuse a challenge, but your unit stays fearless. Like, that's just not
Yeah.
good. Like,
Yeah,
yes,
no,
it's
I
fearless,
totally
not
agree.
stupid, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense in the game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So
how do you feel about overspilling wounds?
So initially, I always found in 40k, when I used to play that, in 6th and 6th edition, it didn't overspill. In 7th edition, it did.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it stupid in 6th edition that things like Tyranids would not overspill. Like, all those gaunts would just stand there and do nothing. Like, it made no sense that these are creatures. They're not doing it for honor. They're not an honor, like orcs as well. Orcs aren't particularly, not honourable. They might get bashed by the big guy who says, "Hey, that fight was mine," but it doesn't really. It's not. It doesn't make a mechanical sense to have 10 guys watching 1v1, especially if they lose and then get chased down and killed. So I think being able to attack makes sense.
Oh no, I don't
You're
mean.
specific.
Sorry.
You're specific there of, if I've got 1-on-1 and I do 6 wounds in the challenge, kill the guy on the first one, do the 5 spill out? I think there's an argument there to say no, because I think that I think you would tinker with the challenge rule to make it more interesting to remove that, because I don't really understand how the guy with the power fist is like doosh 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 all across the like, the guys aren't even near. They're not. The whole point was they're meant to be in this one-on-one swirling combat. So it doesn't really work for me to think that, like, Angron in particular benefits from it a lot. Not only can he issue as many challenges as he has attacks anyway, but like, his overkill, he could gain loads of attacks doing that because he gets it every time. It just doesn't really. Yeah, I'm not convinced it's needed. Struan, again, maybe Struan should get a job as the rules writer, having it as it adds to the combat resolution.
Yeah.
Someone might have
That's what fantasy is. Yeah.
So it's
Finn
actually
saying.
Finn. You should work for Forge World. That I think makes sense. I think that you've not only killed him, not only have you just stabbed him through the heart with a power sword, you've chopped his head off and you've chopped his arm off and embarrassed the whole legion. Like, that is probably where I would go as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well the people can actually. What's wrong with me today? I can't get any words out. Jeez.
Lift your hands above your head and smile and make sure you're not having a stroke.
God. People can, like. Oh my God, this is embarrassing.
How does it relate to 9th
edition? I can't even get the word.
How does it relate to 9th edition?
Making the situation, taking an advantage out of the situation when they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That?
I think that's because it is meant to be. It doesn't really work for. Like, you have crushed that guy with your power fist. What have you? You've not punched him so hard that you've punched his head off and it's killed the guy next to him. Like, that challenge mechanic, I'd be interested to see how you could abuse it the opposite way. So if you've got a guy with a power fist and I've got one plebby, nobody, just got a bolt pistol chainsword, like me, is there a way I can get the benefit by challenging you, knowing you're not going to get to kill like 5 guys with your one superstar? But that's where maybe like a Praetor on his own against 10 guys, you issue the challenge with a Praetor, kill that guy, you're then losing out potentially. Like, because you kill one guy, there's 9 left, they get to hit you, because we're saying you can fighting the combat, and they gain a benefit. So that's where Lee earlier said maybe it should be optional and no downside to refusing. I don't know. There's maybe that's where it gets abused, but I think that's the it's not. There's someone making a good point, like the World Eater guy wouldn't stop after killing the sergeant and not chase after everyone else. So maybe that's where the challenge mechanic fails. Maybe shouldn't be. Maybe a challenge should only be if both players agree or something like that. And that would be maybe where you could be like, no, I'm pretty confident I'm going to wipe this squad out. I'm not wasting all my wins on one guy. That's maybe where the fix is. Okay. So again, base contact deaths in close combat is fine with me. But after that, I would start saying you just start picking who you want again. The odds are if you're removing lots of models, it wouldn't really impact beyond that. And I'm not so bothered. I know he's gone quiet. I don't know if I've chased him off about the previous sort of discussion. The having a power fist at the back of a squad like my Grey Slayers will inevitably have, it doesn't really bother me that guy can just sort of be avoided as you're removing, say you do 6 wounds and I just leave that one model and take the other normal guys away. I've never been that bothered when people do that, because I don't like to get the tape measure out and try and work out who's the closest. I just think that's you're given too much sort of sway again to that sort of perfect line of 3 guys, and you don't take away the power fist. Just get rid of that and just have it be I get to pick. And that way I've paid points for this guy and I can bloody use him with his power fist. Unless you've got precision strikes. So I don't know. I think that's maybe what I'm not as bothered by that as maybe other people would be.
No, I think I'm in the same boat, to be honest, about that one.
And there's so Jody saying extra wounds could spill onto models in base contact. There he is. He's still here. Bing Bong Heresy. No, you've not been sending anything. So you've got your chance to disagree about the taking away who you want. And then Stephen saying it's the same is true when Joe Bloggs jumps in the way. And it's a killing blow that's meant for the character. Well, heroic intervention exists, but I don't think I've ever done one, and I don't think I've ever seen one. So it doesn't really. I think only maybe once with Sigismund, because like I wanted him to get in and start fighting. Ping Bong Heresy is not a fan of my points, but that's okay. I've not blocked you or anything, so it's not me. It's definitely on your side. Okay. Well, feel free to type them or get on the Discord after this, and we'll have a ramble.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll be off to bed. I'll leave you to argue, Richard. Okay, so in terms of kind of anything else in close combat actually before?
Not really. It's a phase. Again with the shooting phase. I think most part of it's all right. I don't have any real qualms with it, apart from what we've already said. Maybe something I would like to see changed, actually, now that I think of it, is sweeping advance. I feel that's like I've been in situations where I've had a 20-man blob of tacticals get charged by a contemptor, and I've lost combat, failed my morale by 1 point, and that contemptor's just sweeping advance 17 guys. And I just feel that's so hard done. It's hilarious.
It's hilarious if you're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe though, like I think that's obviously that's where, because it's a shooting game, they've made close combat that decisive, like kill, and that's why it does that. But that almost, when you read the rules, and I've done that going through this for this, and hopefully you've all read the rules, because otherwise I'm not playing with you. But the rules as written, like even in Book 7, Space Wolves have a right of war that says you have to sweep in advance. There's never a situation where I wouldn't sweep in advance someone. When would you ever opt not to? There's no benefit to it, because you don't have to move after you've wiped the squad out. You get your consolidation, but you don't have to do it. Like, you just move in a little circle if you want. So I wonder if the rules, they've almost decided that, like, it's almost like there is that element. They've assumed that we would maybe like maybe we've read the rules wrong almost. That's what almost feels like
Yeah.
we've done it, where I'm like, have I missed something that suggests that I wouldn't want to sweep? I just don't see. There we go. There's Bing Bong Heresy. Spell in cases you want to wait till your opponent's assault phase to win the combat. Well, but they're going to run away. They failed the morale, so they're already out of the combat at that stage. Bing Bong Heresy. So you're already exposed. So the only benefit you would get would be to charge them again on your turn. So I just don't see why you wouldn't do it to wipe them out, because you're moving a unit from the game. So it feels like almost every Heresy player in existence has read the rule wrong, and Forge World have a different interpretation that you don't get. Like, if you get caught, you don't die. Yeah, but I just don't. If you find out, let me know, because I just don't see where I wouldn't. Like, if I've smashed you in combat, you've got 2 guys left, I want rid of those 2 guys. I don't want you to get away and regroup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. That just doesn't. It is very strong, though, but I think you've kind of earned it if you've slogged your way across the board, getting whittled down. I know Lee and Finn, if they were there, would be thumbing up that. It just doesn't. Yeah, it feels weird that it doesn't work as a Contemptor shouldn't just slashing everyone away out of the way, but I don't see how you could do it differently without completely undermining some of the close combat units.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. In my head, I'm like, maybe rather than killing all the guys, you kill another attack value worth of guys when you catch them. But then how? Yeah. That just feels too.
But how would you decide
little.
who? Yeah, you'd be like, I want to kill your squad sergeant, your Vexilla, and your plasma gun. Like, it's that sort of how do you do it? Yeah. Yeah, I sort of agree with Finn there, saying they should all get killed. But yeah, I agree there is something in that that's not quite. It's not working because it is so brutal. But the game kind of feels brutal sometimes. But
yeah,
it's probably the most reliable brutality you can do to someone. If you get your my Death Sworn get in close combat against Tactical Marines, I'm like, whoa, this is I'm definitely got these guys.
I mean, to be fair, I'm sort of nitpicking on that point. I'm looking at the extreme edge of it in that situation I had, but that doesn't happen every game. So, boom fell. So,
worried about you there.
Sorry, on you go.
No, I think that's that. Yeah, some of the points that are being made are kind of good in that you get to make sort of bonus attacks, so you get to do. But I don't know. I think it's probably the idea. Like, we've all done it. You win the combat. You've got 2 guys left, and you chase down 10.
Yeah.
And somehow those 2 guys are either capturing. I think in the rulebook it used to be written they tied them up or they executed them or whatever. Just doesn't. Kind of almost picture Han Solo running down the Death Star room, and then he runs into 50 stormtroopers and then turns and runs away. There's insane bravado, and then there's sort of you're not going to do this. But I don't know. I don't think we can. I can't see a fix for it.
No,
it isn't sort of just
not one that completely unbalances it.
And if you did something say you failed the morale by 6, you just remove 6 models. I think that's 8th. I don't know if 9th still does that.
Nah, 9th does that, but
I don't really like that. I think that's where you just die of shock.
That's. The reason I didn't bring it up is because that's one of the rules at 9th I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah. You've got to give a bit about it as well. You can't just say 9th is great all the time. You have to say bad things about it too.
I know, but this is a Heresy chat, not 9th chat. But no, it sort of removes a bit of thematicism and narrativeness. I'm seeing Bing Bong's comment about a concession to the rules against realism. That's a fair point. I mean, when you start playing Warhammer to real life, you're going down a bad path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of it's with all of this. And I said it last time we had this comment. I'm not saying they've done a crap job and I don't enjoy the game as it is. I'm saying there are things I would change. And I think that's there are definitely bits in this game you just cannot be realistic about, and the jet
No.
fighter situation was the perfect example. Like, it
Aye,
doesn't.
absolutely.
They're flying across the battlefield at, like, essentially you shouldn't even have a model. You should just be saying what your fighter did, and that's it. You never have to actually own the model. So yeah, it's not a very I'll ban that man immediately for sliding spaces. It just doesn't. I think you have to. You do, and I know we're being nitpicky, and I know we're being maybe harsh on the game. We do love it, both of us and Welsh.
Yep.
Love this game. It's not about sort of shitting on it. We're just sort of saying there's bits on it we'd like to tweak, because there's some bits could be better. I don't think the realism is ever going to be there, because of, and as we've said, the system is I go, you go. Like, I have my full turn. I thought I go, you go was the system where I take a turn, you take a turn, and it's clicker. Maybe I've got them mixed up, but yeah, I don't feel like when I've got to do my full turn and then you get to do your full turn, you're ever going to get realism, because somehow I've shot loads of your guys to death and they don't get to do anything. Yeah, alternate activations, that's a better way of calling it. Okay, so nothing else on Assault?
No, that's me all assaulted out.
So chucking in morale now, because it can happen in the shooting phase or the assault phase.
Yes.
I don't tend to run Vexillas. I'm not sure why. I don't really. I've got plenty of them, because you get loads of them in the plastic kits. I don't really feel it's maybe just my bad memory, but I just don't feel the need to use them. I really enjoy using a chaplain or a wolf priest. I think my chaplain in my World Eaters Assault Marine army is almost an essential, because of the fearless not running away and all those rerolls it gives, because it sort of gives them that strong narrative, realistic, if you want to call it that, feeling when they get across the board and get you.
Yep.
I don't know, it's not really a phase you can influence, because short of a Vexilla or a fearless bubble, there's not a lot you can do. But is there anything in there, like, do you run? We don't tend to see many command squads to get the wee bubble of fearlessness.
I love command squads. I love the idea of them. I do try and run them sometimes, but I think the I've said it before, actually, in our first episode, that command squad profile really needs updated to be better to be used. I love the idea of them. The fearless bubble is really good. It's rare in Heresy as well, so I can really. I wouldn't say it can sort of affects the outcome of a game usually too much, but I've had a command squad really save my ass a couple of times, and that's when you're using that really good.
I think that's where someone like Angron is completely underrated with his 24-inch fearless bubble. Like, that is amazing. Is it 12 or 24? I can't remember. It's quite a big one anyway.
I think.
For this.
Yeah, because the command squad's like 6.
Yeah,
so I think he's 12.
Yeah, and that's like so good if you've got him in the middle of your army.
Well, the command squad thing that happened to me, I was actually playing Gary Crossley, and I had Alfarius in a command squad, and they were in a Land Raider, and I had a 10-man plasma squad in a Rhino following up with them. Plasma squad came out, in Gary's turn, he pinned them. So, and in front of them, there's like 10 bloody Death Shroud or something, so they were just about to die, really. But that command squad came out of the Land Raider, and because it's got the fearless bubble, it brings them back up, and they just let it rip.
Yeah.
And it's in bits like that, that's when you really see the benefit of running those things, like with that fearless bubble.
Maybe a command squad's a bad sort of, because I find the actual unit themselves to be a bit weak. Like,
yeah.
They're not particularly good, but unless you put them on, like, is it jet bikes they can take or normal bikes? I can't remember. They can only do one, can't they? But that's good. So I could see them being quite. If you beefed them up, they would be particularly useful. But as it stands, they're not spectacular, and that's where I think most people would probably run, rather than a command squad. They'd put, I don't know, 5 Varriger or Terminators or whatever you want as your. No, you get a Terminator command squad, but you can use. Your
elites, yeah. Some armies have that option, but some don't. I just think it's like I said, that squad does need an update. But we're sort of.
Oh, on you go.
No, I was saying we're sort of going down. I don't know if we're going down the. We're sort of like going off in a wee side path here on the squad, really. But
Dexillas, though, do you use those?
I don't, mate. I don't because I think when I'm rolling leadership 9, 10, a lot of the time I don't really see me using them that often. I don't fail that often. I roll ones most of the time, so it's fine.
That's true. That comes in handy. Yeah, so morale's that's not really a phase that's
No,
it's not really a phase in itself either, is it? I don't tend to. I think one of the things that kind of bugs me in the game itself is when you're shooting lots and lots of things, and your opponent's trying to be nice by saying like, "Oh, are you going to shoot any more at this squad?" Trying to like take their morale. I feel like I don't mind them rolling, but if I don't know, say you measure say I've got lots of stuff going on the left-hand side of the board, and then I say, oh yeah, you can roll that. I'm not going to shoot at them, and then I have to. I almost feel like it's bad of me to be like, oh no, I'm shooting at them again. They've already taken their morale test and passed or failed. So it doesn't matter because there's no modifiers. But I kind of feel that's one of the bits of the game that it's almost like you want a counter that you can just put down next to the unit and you can just remove them all. It's a minor thing. It's not. It's just kind of. I notice it's something in the game that quite a lot of people want to speed it up because they're sort of like egging you on to finish your turn so they can get on with theirs. But
I guess it's partly psychological of that. It's not fun to take morale checks on your guys. You're getting battered, really. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's where that comes from.
Okay. And then finally, and I'm conscious of the time as well. So you get to the end of the turn. Have you lost? No models left. Is an auto lose. Again, controversial maybe. I actually hate that.
I agree.
I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's a good mechanic for the game because it encourages you to play like that. That's why at the Heresy.Scot events you don't. That's just not a rule that exists. So if you're tabled on turn 5 and your opponent hasn't bothered to move on to the objectives because they've sat at the back of the board all game shooting you, they just don't win then, and it could end up being a draw depending on sort of the other secondary victory conditions. I know that'll probably go against the grain for some people because it's sort of like you've got nothing left. If I do that on turn 1, I've got 4 turns of nothing to play against. But my point there really is like you have to be able to be mobile enough to get to the objectives within those 4 turns. And it might be crap to play the mechanic of you just playing on your own and your opponent's just watching you. And I sympathise with that. But I really hate the tabling mechanic. I think it is something that it should be minimised from the hobby because it's crap. Like, and it's not that hard to make an army that has a good chance of tabling people if you want to on an average game. I don't think anyway. And I would rather have a more enjoyable experience with achieving an objective. Like if you're sitting, obviously the scale of a 30k game doesn't really work in real life, but if you were sitting 50 miles away shelling someone for 3 days and the objective was to capture the city, we've not captured the city yet, and time's ran out because you've only got a week to do it and you've spent the full week shelling the city instead. So I don't know what you think. It sounds like you agree, but I don't know what you think.
No, I completely agree. I think it was our last stream I brought this up about 9th and 8th Fed 40k, where they brought in that you can table your opponent but you still count up, or you still play till the end, and then count up your victory points or whatever. I think that's a direction a lot of GW games are going now because it's just a nicer system to play rather than coming across someone who's like, I'm just going to batter you. I don't care about the objectives. I just want to kick your face in, pretty much. It's much nicer when you're both playing for the objectives and you have to play for the objectives, in my opinion.
I think so. I think I'm surprised.
And I think, sorry, I was just going to finish off there with, I think you've made a good point about that city thing. If you've rolled for a game and the objective is to capture X amount of objectives or hold them, then you should both be really playing that rather than,
And I think that's where like the short game it should factor in. I don't think it's particularly like it encourages an unhealthy game if you can always win just by doing that, because it's like if I could be winning 100-0, but on turn 5 or we roll for turn 6, we get turn 6 and you shoot my last infantryman off the board and you win. That's what I don't really like, that mechanic, because it's like, if the objective was me to capture objectives, and the idea is like the story behind it is my guys are filling up ammo barrels and walking them off the field or whatever, and you've done nothing like that, you've just sat there shooting me. Unless that's your objective, you shouldn't win. Like, I don't. There's obviously a need for kill point missions, and they can be fun, and it is some. I mean, how many times have you played a game where you've rolled a crap deployment and a crap mission, and you just go, you know what, let's just do Dawn of War deployment and that one that has the kill points, and that's fine. And I probably enjoy that game type the most, because then you don't really have any shocks along the way. But I really feel like that would be a big positive change for me. Would be to stop you doing that. So Ping Pong Heresy has argued with us throughout. I guess my point more is, if you haven't been moving forward, I don't see why you should win. If the objectives are in the middle of the board, and I've moved all my guys forward, and Richard has shot them all and killed them all, I don't see how he's won. Like,
no.
Because the objective is, over the course of the game, to collect those objectives, or be in base contact with them. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not saying you should, if you did it on turn 2, I think you should get the remaining 3 turns and the rolls, if there are any, for variable to get to the objectives. And even if he just gets one of them, he's going to win, because usually the victory points for the primary objective massively outweigh the secondary objectives.
Yeah.
But I just don't, and it would make something like War of Lies really funny, because you could have someone who's sat right at the back, bang, 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 run on to the one objective they can get, and then it's -3, and they actually end up with a negative victory point score.
A thing to remember as well is that at the end of the day, the game you're playing is just a small snapshot of a wider battlefield. So if your armies, if those are the objectives that you've been tasked to get, you know.
I think that's where sort of like a narrative that we try and thread through our events is really important. I think that's where you can sort of try and tie it together of the loyalists have to hold this ground by until midnight, where they're going to get reinforcements from off-world, and the traitors are killing them in their swathes, but they don't take the city because they haven't moved into the actual walls of the city. They've just sat outside and shot anyone who dares to stick their head up. That's what I'm kind of getting at. And I think the Bing Bong suggestion there of a draw, well, it probably would be a draw in that, like, because the primary objective will be 3 victory points for holding the objective usually. So it's going to be First Blood, slay the Warlord. You'll probably win 2-0 by tabling your opponent, unless they've got you first or something. So it will be a slow scoring game. You're probably still going to win. Like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say you don't score First Blood or Slay the Warlord or whatever you've done up till that point, but I don't think you should automatically count as winning when you could be 2-0 down because your opponent has got First Blood and Slay the Warlord.
Yeah.
And you'd get 1 point for Slay the Warlord, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'll just disagree and moralise because I think it's funny.
That's a great game.
Only when it works for you. So that's my, in essence, way through the turns. I don't think there's any benefit to going through, right, movement to turn 2. So if there is anyone, jump in with things in the comments, because we'll start winding down now, unless you've got anything exciting to add, Richard.
No, not really. I think we've given this a good cover today. Really good cover.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd get through it all, so it's kind of good that we managed to. Does realism in this case trump having an enjoyable gaming experience? I think that it is just a personal preference, and it's not. There hasn't been. I think it's only come up once or twice in events, at Heresy.Scot events, where someone has been badly impacted by that when they have been in a prime position. But I think it just keeps it going. Like, we have had people who've come to the events with very strong lists, and they have done a number on their opponent. And I think it's the only realistic way me as an event organizer can look that loser in the eye and say, look, you only lost by 1 victory point, so it's not that important in the grand scheme of the battle. So don't go away gutted. Like, if you just got, I don't know, say it was like 10-0 because you automatically score all the objectives because it's a crushing victory. I don't like that. I don't think it's fair. So that's kind of the mechanics behind that. So realism is what I'm kind of getting at by saying you need to be in the city by midnight, which is turn 7. And if you're not, then you're not getting the objective. You haven't done it. You haven't achieved what you set out to do.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
Finn,
I agree.
Finn, I always look at you with such love in my eyes. You're always the first person to buy a ticket. That's whether you're a glutton for punishment or not, it's up to you. So I don't think there's anything else to cover, really. What we would like would be more feedback. So we've had some really, really good feedback. Admin@Heresy.Scot. If you want to talk about the format, don't tell us we're ugly, or as Gary Crossley came in and said, slagged off 2 of the 3 hairdos in the group. We really need the feedback. Just message one of us as well if you want to do that and have a chat about it. It makes a big difference to the stream, the format we're trying to do. And we're looking for more ideas. We've got a few ideas still lined up, things we'd like to talk about, but what would interest you guys in particular would be what we're after, because you're the ones that are sitting listening to us ramble on. And we've still got some event tickets left if you're after some. There's not that many. For some reason, we have timed it perfectly and everyone wants to come along in November, so that's brilliant news. So if you are interested, just shoot me a message. I will do a sort of waiting list, but I won't hold a ticket for too long because we want to make sure we do sell this out if we can, which would be a first for Heresy events in Scotland, I think. So that'd be fantastic. So we're going to jump on to the Discord. The link was shared earlier by my alternate account. And I'd also like to congratulate us. I'll do it again just so you've got it, but I'll congratulate us on getting our Russian bots come in there and offered to give us more followers, which is fantastic. That's great news for us. But we'll be on there. I'll be on. I'll just go and get a tea or something, and then I'll jump straight onto the Discord. And it'll be good to have a bit of a chat about what you think, and then you can give us feedback as well. So thanks for watching. Hope Welshie's okay if he watches this back. Hope everyone's gone well. And thank you, Richard, for your time tonight. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Just before we cut off, I'd just like to say, just remember, if you're putting stuff on Instagram, use the hashtag Heresy.ScotCast when you're posting up your images, okay? Because we want to see more, loads more. We love all that, so that's all I want to say.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll see you in the Discord shortly then.
Cool.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye.